Lucas Reed stood in his neighbor's doorway at 9:30 on a Thursday night, holding a borrowed mailbox key he'd meant to return 3 days ago. What he found on the other side changed everything. Mara Collins, the woman he'd exchanged polite waves with for 2 years, stood there with mascara streaked down her cheeks, her wedding ring still on her finger, and the kind of shattered look that comes from watching your entire life walk out the door. Her husband had left her that morning. Lucas had come for a key. He stayed for something neither of them expected. If you want to see how two broken people find their way back to wholeness, stick with me until the end. And hey, drop a like and comment what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Lucas Reed had learned early that life didn't announce its turning points with fanfare. They arrived quietly, disguised as ordinary moments. A phone call, a doctor's appointment, a knock on the door at an inconvenient hour. At 32, he'd survived enough of them to recognize the weight of small decisions, the way a single choice could redirect everything that followed. Thursday night should have been unremarkable. His daughter Emma was asleep upstairs, her nightlight casting familiar shadows across the hallway. Lucas had finished the dishes, checked the locks, and remembered, finally, that he still had Mara Collins's mailbox key. She'd lent it to him the previous Monday when his own mail had been misdelivered to her address, a common occurrence on their street where the houses sat close enough that mistakes happened with casual frequency. He'd meant to return it Tuesday, then Wednesday. By Thursday evening, it felt ridiculous that he still had it tucked in the bowl by his front door where he kept his wallet and Emma's school permission slips. The November air carried that particular chill that promised winter without delivering it yet, cold enough to make him grab his jacket, but not so cold that he bothered zipping it. The walk to Mara's house took less than 30 seconds, 4 houses down, his yard bleeding into hers without clear demarcation except for the slight difference in grass height where his mower cut a different pattern than her lawn service. He'd lived next to the Collinses for almost 2 years. In that time, he'd exchanged the standard pleasantries with both Mara and her husband Derek. Waves when retrieving the morning paper, brief conversations about weather or neighborhood association business, the kind of cordial distance that characterized suburban life. Lucas knew Derek worked in pharmaceutical sales, traveled frequently, drove a black Audi that he washed every Sunday morning with unnecessary thoroughness. He knew Mara taught yoga somewhere, kept her garden immaculate, and smiled politely but rarely with any real warmth. They were the kind of neighbors you noticed without really knowing. Pleasant, unremarkable, safe in their separateness. Lucas knocked on the door at 9:30, the porch light illuminating the welcome mat that read "Home Sweet Home" in cursive script. He heard movement inside. Footsteps, a pause, then more footsteps that seemed to hesitate before approaching the door. When it opened, Lucas found himself looking at a stranger. Mara stood in the doorway wearing yoga pants and an oversized sweater that had slipped off one shoulder. Her dark hair, usually pulled back in a neat ponytail, hung loose and tangled around her face. But it was her eyes that stopped him, red-rimmed, swollen, swimming with the kind of tears that came from hours of crying, not minutes. "Lucas," she said, and her voice cracked on his name like something breaking. He'd been about to say something casual. "Sorry to bother you this late, just wanted to return your key." But the words died in his throat. Behind her, he could see into the house. A lamp lay on its side on the living room floor. Picture frames sat stacked against the wall, removed from their hooks, leaving pale rectangles on the painted surface. A suitcase sat open on the couch, half packed with men's clothing. "I'm sorry," Mara said, wiping at her face with the sleeve of her sweater. This isn't a good time." Lucas held up the key. "I just came to return this. I can leave it in your mailbox if—" He left. The words came out flat, factual, as if she were testing how they sounded when spoken aloud. "Derek. He left this morning, packed his things during his lunch break while I was teaching a class. Left me a note on the kitchen counter." Lucas stood frozen on the porch, the key suddenly feeling like an anchor in his hand. He'd prepared for a 30-second interaction, not this, not standing witness to someone's life falling apart in real time. "I'm sorry," he said, and meant it, though the words felt inadequate. "I should go. There's someone else." Mara laughed, but it was a hollow sound, sharp-edged and brittle. "Her name is Jennifer. She works in his office. He said it's been going on for 8 months. 8 months? And I didn't know. How do you not know something like that?" She wasn't really asking him. She was asking the universe, asking herself, asking the empty space where certainty used to be. Lucas recognized the look. He'd worn it himself once, years ago, when his ex-wife had told him she was leaving, that being a mother wasn't what she'd signed up for, that she needed to find herself somewhere that didn't include diapers and daycare schedules. "You couldn't have known," Lucas said quietly. "That's not on you." Mara's face crumpled. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks, and she covered her mouth with her hand as if she could physically stop the sob that escaped anyway. She took a step back from the door, and Lucas found himself stepping forward, crossing the threshold without quite deciding to do so. The house felt wrong, too quiet, too empty, like a stage set after the performance had ended. The furniture was all there, but something essential had been removed, leaving only the suggestion of what had been. "I'm sorry," Mara said again, gesturing vaguely at her tear-stained face, the disarray of the living room, the evidence of her unraveling. "You came to return a key, and I'm being ridiculous." "You're not being ridiculous," Lucas said. He closed the door behind him, a small gesture that felt larger than it was. "Your husband left you today. You're allowed to fall apart." She laughed again, that same broken sound. "I called my sister. She said I should be relieved, that Derek was never good enough for me anyway. As if finding out your marriage was a lie is supposed to feel like liberation." Lucas didn't know what to say to that. He was a man who worked with his hands, who fixed things that could be fixed and accepted the things that couldn't. He knew how to change oil, how to repair drywall, how to braid his daughter's hair in 3 different styles because she'd asked him to learn. He didn't know how to fix heartbreak, but he knew how to stay. "Do you have coffee?" he asked. Mara blinked at him, confused by the question. "What?" "Coffee or tea, something hot. You're shaking." She looked down at her hands as if surprised to find them trembling. "I think there's coffee. I made some this morning, but I haven't been able to eat or drink anything all day." "Show me where it is," Lucas said. "I'll make fresh." The kitchen was immaculate, everything in its place with the kind of precision that spoke of someone who found control in order. Lucas located the coffee maker, the filters, the grounds in a sealed container by the stove. As he measured and poured, Mara sat at the kitchen table, her hands folded in front of her like a child waiting for instruction. "Why are you doing this?" she asked quietly. Lucas looked at her over his shoulder. "Doing what?" "Being kind. We barely know each other." He turned back to the coffee maker, watching it hiss and drip. "You needed someone to make you coffee. I know how to make coffee. It's not complicated." "It feels complicated," Mara said. "Everything feels complicated right now." The coffee finished brewing. Lucas found 2 mugs in the cabinet, one that said "World's Best Wife," which he immediately put back, and another plain blue one that he filled for her. He poured his own in a white mug that had a chip on the rim, then brought both to the table. Mara wrapped her hands around the mug, absorbing its warmth. "Thank you." They sat in silence for a while. Lucas sipped his coffee. It was good, better than what he usually made at home, and waited. He'd learned this from Emma, who would sometimes come home from school wound tight with feelings she couldn't name. Pushing her to talk never worked. But sitting with her, being present without demanding anything, that opened doors. "I found the note at 2:30, Mara said eventually. He'd left it on the counter, under the salt shaker, like it was a grocery list or something casual. "Mara, I can't do this anymore. I've been seeing someone else, and I need to be honest with myself and you. I've moved my things out. My lawyer will contact you about the divorce." That was it. 12 years of marriage, and I got 4 sentences. Lucas set down his mug. Jesus. I called him. He didn't answer. I called 6 times. On the 7th try, he texted me back. "I'm sorry, but this is for the best. Please don't make this harder than it has to be." She shook her head. "Don't make it hard. As if there's an easy way to discover your entire life was a performance." "How long were you together?" Lucas asked. "We met when I was 23. Got married when I was 25. I thought—" She stopped, took a breath. "I thought we were building something. A family, eventually. A life. He always said he wanted kids, but the timing was never right. First it was his career, then it was saving for a house, then it was wanting to travel more. I kept waiting for the right time. And now I'm 34 and I've wasted 12 years on someone who was planning his exit while I was planning our future. Lucas understood that particular brand of grief, not just losing someone, but losing the future you'd imagined with them. When his ex-wife left, he'd grieved not just her absence, but all the moments that would never happen. Family vacations, watching Emma graduate, growing old together. The phantom life hurt more than the real one sometimes. You didn't waste anything, Lucas said. You loved him. That's not waste, even if he didn't deserve it. Mara looked at him with those red-rimmed eyes, searching his face for something. Pity, judgment, false comfort. Whatever she found seemed to satisfy her because she nodded slowly and took a sip of her coffee. Can I ask you something? She said. Sure. Are you married? Lucas shook his head. Divorced. 4 years now. Kids? A daughter, Emma. She's 7. Where's her mother? It was a fair question, asked without malice. Lucas had answered it enough times that the words came easily, stripped of their original pain. California, last I heard. She sends birthday cards sometimes. Calls maybe twice a year. She left when Emma was 3. Said motherhood wasn't what she expected. She wanted freedom, adventure, herself back. I got full custody. We managed fine. That must be hard, Mara said, raising a child alone. It's all I know, Lucas replied. You adapt. You figure it out because you have to. Emma's a good kid. Smart, funny, resilient. She asks about her mom sometimes, but she's not angry about it. Kids are better at accepting reality than adults are. Mara smiled faintly. I teach yoga to kids sometimes. You're right, they're remarkably adaptable. It's the parents who struggle. What kind of yoga do you teach? Lucas asked, grateful for the shift in conversation. Vinyasa, mostly. Some restorative classes in the evenings. I teach at a studio downtown, but I also do private sessions. Or I did. She gestured vaguely. I don't know what I'll do now. Derek handled all the finances, the mortgage, the bills, everything. I don't even know how much money we have or what I'm entitled to or how any of this works. You'll figure it out, Lucas said, one step at a time. Everyone keeps saying that. My sister, my mother, the one friend I've managed to tell, one step at a time. But I don't know what the first step is supposed to be. Do I call a lawyer? Do I change the locks? Do I take down all the pictures of us together? Do I throw out his stuff or pack it up or burn it? Her voice rose with each question, panic threading through the words. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be the person whose husband leaves them for someone else. Lucas reached across the table and placed his hand over hers. The gesture surprised them both. He wasn't a naturally tactile person, had learned to keep careful distance between himself and others as a form of self-preservation. But Mara was drowning, and sometimes the only thing you could offer someone drowning was proof that they weren't alone. You don't have to know, he said. Not tonight. Tonight you just have to breathe. Everything else can wait until tomorrow. Mara stared at their joined hands, then up at his face. Why are you still here? I don't know, Lucas admitted, but I am. She turned her hand over, palm up, and laced her fingers through his. Her grip was tight, desperate, like someone holding on to keep from falling. They sat like that for a long moment, two near strangers connected by crisis and coffee and the strange intimacy of shared silence. Finally, Mara pulled her hand back and wrapped it around her mug again. I should let you go. You probably have to get back to your daughter. She's asleep, Lucas said, and my next-door neighbor is a retired teacher who watches her when I have to work late. I can call her if I need to stay longer. You don't have to stay. I know. But he didn't move to leave, and Mara didn't ask him to again. They talked for another hour, not about Derek, not about divorce or betrayal or broken promises. They talked about small things, Lucas's work renovating houses, Mara's dream of opening her own yoga studio, the books they'd read recently, the strange phenomenon of their neighborhood's obsession with elaborate Christmas decorations that started appearing in early November. The conversation meandered without purpose, filling space and time with proof that the world still contained ordinary moments, even in the middle of extraordinary pain. At 11:30, Lucas finally stood. I should go, but I'm next door if you need anything. Mara walked him to the door. She looked exhausted, hollowed out, but some of the raw panic had left her eyes. "Thank you, Lucas. For staying. For not treating me like I'm made of glass." "You're not made of glass," Lucas said. "You're stronger than you think." "I don't feel strong." "Nobody feels strong when they're breaking. But you're still here. That counts for something." He handed her the mailbox key, the original reason for his visit, now feeling like a relic from another lifetime. Mara took it and smiled. A small, genuine smile that transformed her tear-stained face into something softer. "Good night, Lucas." "Good night, Mara." He walked back to his house in the cold November air, his hands shoved in his pockets, his mind replaying the last 2 hours with something close to disbelief. He'd gone next door to return a key. He'd stayed because staying seemed like the only decent thing to do. Now, walking back across the familiar stretch of lawn between their houses, he felt the weight of connection forming, fragile, unexpected, but undeniably present. Inside his own house, he checked on Emma, who slept with her favorite stuffed elephant tucked under her chin. He stood in her doorway for a moment, watching her breathe, grateful for the simplicity of her world. She didn't know about cheating spouses or broken marriages or the way love could curdle into betrayal. She knew that her daddy made her breakfast every morning, helped with her homework every night, and never broke his promises. That was enough. It had to be enough. Lucas went to bed but didn't sleep well. He kept thinking about Mara sitting alone in that too-empty house, surrounded by the architecture of a life that had just collapsed. He thought about the way she'd held his hand like someone drowning, the way she'd laughed that broken laugh, the way she'd smiled at the end despite everything. He didn't know what would happen next. Didn't know if Mara would want his help or his company or anything beyond what he'd already given. But he knew that something had shifted, that the careful distance between their lives had narrowed to something closer, more complicated. Friday morning arrived with pale sunlight and frost on the grass. Lucas made Emma her usual breakfast, scrambled eggs and toast with too much butter, the way she liked it, and walked her to the bus stop at the end of their street. As they waited, he glanced toward Mara's house. The porch light was still on from the night before, and Derek's Audi was conspicuously absent from the driveway. "Daddy, you're not listening," Emma said, tugging on his jacket. "Sorry, sweetheart. What were you saying?" "I asked if we can have pizza tonight, please, with extra cheese." Lucas smiled down at his daughter's hopeful face. "Sure, pizza sounds good." The bus arrived. Emma kissed his cheek and bounded up the steps, already chattering with her friends before the doors closed. Lucas waved as the bus pulled away, then turned back toward his house. He saw Mara standing on her porch, still in her yoga pants and oversized sweater, holding a steaming mug and looking out at the morning with hollow eyes. When she noticed him looking, she raised her hand in a small wave. Lucas waved back. Then, without overthinking it, he walked across the lawn toward her house. "Morning," he called when he was close enough. "Morning," Mara replied. Her voice was rough with exhaustion. "Did you sleep?" "Not really. You?" "Not really." They stood there in the cold morning air, two people who'd been strangers less than 24 hours ago, now connected by the strange alchemy of crisis and kindness. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do today," Mara admitted. "I canceled my classes, called in sick, even though I'm not sick. I can't face people yet." "That's okay," Lucas said. "You don't have to face anyone. I have to call a lawyer. I have to figure out the mortgage. I have to—" She stopped, overwhelmed by the enormity of it all. "How about this?" Lucas said. "How about today? You don't do anything you don't want to do. Tomorrow you can start making calls. But today, you just be." Mara looked at him with something like gratitude. "Is that what you did? When your wife left?" "No," Lucas admitted. "I tried to do everything at once. Fell apart spectacularly. Would not recommend." That got a small smile from her. "So you're speaking from experience." Hard-won experience. She took a sip of her coffee. "Do you have to work today?" "I'm renovating a kitchen in Charlottesville. My crew can handle it without me for a day." "You'd skip work?" "I'd take a personal day." Mara studied him for a long moment. "Why?" Lucas shrugged. "Because you shouldn't be alone today. And because I remember what it feels like to wake up in an empty house and not know how to fill the hours." She didn't argue, just nodded slowly, accepting the offer for what it was, Not pity, not obligation, but simple human decency extended without expectation of return. "Come inside," she said. "I'll make breakfast. Or try to. I haven't actually eaten in 24 hours and I'm starting to feel dizzy." They went inside together. Lucas made toast while Mara scrambled eggs, their movements in the kitchen developing an awkward rhythm as they navigated the unfamiliar space of shared domesticity. They ate at the kitchen table, the same spot where they'd sat the night before, and talked about nothing important: the weather, the news, a funny story about Emma's teacher. After breakfast, Mara showered and changed. When she emerged, she looked more like herself, hair pulled back, wearing jeans and a sweater that actually fit, but her eyes still carried the weight of sleepless grief. "I should take down the pictures," she said, looking at the wall where frames had been removed. "All the wedding photos, the vacation pictures, I can't look at them." "Do you want help?" Lucas asked. Together, they moved through the house, gathering every photograph that included Derek. There were dozens. Their wedding day, anniversaries, trips to beaches and mountains and cities Lucas didn't recognize. In every picture, they looked happy. Derek's arm around Mara's shoulders, Mara laughing at something he'd said, both of them smiling at the camera with the confidence of people who believed their happiness was permanent. "It all looks so real," Mara said, holding a photo from their 5th anniversary. "How can something look this real and be completely fake?" "Maybe it was real," Lucas offered. "At the time, maybe he did love you once before he changed. That doesn't make it hurt less." "No, it doesn't." They packed the photographs in a box and carried it to the garage. Mara taped it shut with more force than necessary, then stood back and stared at it like it contained something dangerous. "I should burn it," she said. "You should wait," Lucas countered. "Make that decision when you're not still bleeding." She looked at him, surprised. "You think I'll want them back?" "I think you might want the choice. Right now you're in survival mode. Everything feels immediate and desperate. But later when you've healed, you might want proof that you were loved once, even if it ended badly." Mara considered this. "Did you keep pictures of your ex-wife?" "Some. For Emma's sake. She doesn't remember much about her mother, but she has the right to have those memories preserved." "That's generous of you." Lucas shook his head. "It's practical. Anger fades, bitterness fades. But Emma deserves to know where she comes from, even if it's complicated." They spent the rest of the morning organizing the house, not erasing Derek's presence entirely, but containing it. His clothes went into trash bags destined for donation. His toiletries disappeared from the bathroom. His books came off the shelves. With each item removed, the house began to feel less like a crime scene and more like a space Mara might be able to inhabit again. Lucas ordered lunch, Chinese food from a place Emma loved, figuring Mara needed to eat something substantial. They sat on the living room floor surrounded by half-packed boxes and ate lo mein straight from the containers, and Mara laughed when Lucas failed spectacularly at using chopsticks. "You're supposed to hold them like this," she demonstrated, her fingers positioned correctly. "My fingers don't bend that way," Lucas protested, fumbling again. "You're impossible. I prefer fork-compatible." It was a small moment, inconsequential in the grand scheme of loss and grief. But it mattered. This ability to laugh, to tease, to exist in the present without the weight of yesterday crushing everything. After lunch, exhaustion caught up with Mara. She curled up on the couch, and Lucas covered her with a blanket he found in the hall closet. She was asleep within minutes, her face finally peaceful in unconsciousness. Lucas sat in the armchair across from her and pulled out his phone. He texted his crew foreman about the Charlottesville job, then called his neighbor to check on Emma's after-school pickup. Everything was fine. Everything was handled. For once, he could be exactly where he needed to be without guilt pulling him elsewhere. He watched Mara sleep and thought about the strange trajectory of the last 18 hours. Yesterday, at this time, she'd been a neighbor he barely knew. Now she was someone he'd seen broken and was helping piece back together. Not because he had to. Not because he expected anything in return. But because the alternative, leaving her alone in her pain, felt wrong in a way he couldn't articulate. When Mara woke an hour later, she seemed disoriented, confused to find Lucas still there. "You stayed. You were sleeping. Didn't want you to wake up alone." She sat up, pushing hair out of her face. "Lucas, I can't keep taking up your whole day." You have a daughter, a job, a life. All handled, he said simply. Emma's at my neighbor's. Work can wait. Life can adapt for 24 hours. Why are you doing this? It was the second time she'd asked, and this time there was something else in her voice. Not just confusion, but something that sounded almost like fear. Lucas leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Because 4 years ago, when my wife left, I tried to handle everything alone. I didn't ask for help. I didn't let people in. I white-knuckled my way through every day and told myself that was strength. And it nearly broke me. He paused. You don't have to do that. You don't have to prove you're strong by suffering alone. Mara's eyes filled with tears again, but she blinked them back. I barely know you. So get to know me. We've got time. She laughed, watery but genuine. This is insane. 24 hours ago, we were just neighbors. And now we're neighbors who make coffee and pack boxes and eat Chinese food on the floor. It's not that complicated. It feels complicated. Most things do when you're in the middle of them. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the afternoon light shifting across the room, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. Outside, Lucas could hear neighborhood sounds, a dog barking, children playing, the distant hum of traffic. The world continuing despite the small devastation contained within these four walls. Thank you, Mara said finally. For today, for last night, for not running away when you saw what a mess I am. You're not a mess, Lucas said. You're surviving. Is there a difference? Yeah. A mess is something that needs cleaning up. Surviving is what you do when the world tries to break you and you refuse to let it win. Mara pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. I don't feel like I'm winning. You're still here. You're still breathing. You ate lunch. You laughed. Those are victories. Small victories. Those are the only kind that matter. Lucas stayed until evening, until his neighbor texted that Emma was asking for him. Before he left, Mara walked him to the door, the same threshold they'd crossed the night before, now familiar with repetition. Will you come back? She asked, and there was vulnerability in the question that made Lucas's chest tight. Tomorrow, he promised. I'll come check on you tomorrow. You don't have to. I know, but I will. He walked home through the darkening evening, his breath visible in the cold air, and found Emma in his living room building an elaborate fort out of couch cushions and blankets. She looked up when he entered, her face bright with excitement. Daddy, you're home. Come see what I made. Lucas knelt beside her fort and admired the engineering and listened to her detailed explanation of its various rooms and purposes and felt the strange duality of his current existence. Father in this house, friend in the one next door, both roles demanding pieces of him he hadn't known he had to give. That night, after Emma was asleep, Lucas stood at his bedroom window and looked across the narrow stretch of lawn toward Mara's house. The lights were on downstairs, a warm glow against the darkness. He wondered if she was okay, if she'd managed to eat dinner, if she was sleeping or lying awake replaying every moment of her marriage looking for signs she'd missed. He didn't have answers, didn't know how to fix what was broken in her life any more than he'd known how to fix what broke in his own 4 years ago. But he knew how to show up, how to make coffee and pack boxes and sit with someone in their pain without trying to explain it away. Tomorrow he'd go back. They'd figure out the next step together. And the day after that, they'd figure out the one after that. One moment, one breath, one small victory at a time. It wasn't much, but sometimes it was everything. The next morning arrived with the kind of gray sky that promised rain without delivering it, clouds heavy and low, but stubbornly holding their burden. Lucas woke early, as he always did, and moved through his morning routine with the precision of long practice. Coffee first, then Emma's lunch packed, her backpack checked for homework and permission slips that needed signing. She ate her cereal while telling him about a project on butterflies her class was starting, her enthusiasm bright enough to make the gray morning feel less oppressive. Can we go to the library this weekend? Emma asked, milk dripping from her spoon. Mrs. Peterson said we need to research our butterfly and make a poster. Sure thing, Lucas said, wiping a drop of milk from her chin with his thumb. Which butterfly did you pick? The monarch. They migrate thousands of miles, Daddy. Thousands, all the way to Mexico and back. That's pretty incredible. Mrs. Peterson says they navigate using the sun and some kind of magnetic thing in their brain. Isn't that cool? Lucas smiled, grateful for his daughter's ability to find wonder in the world. Very cool. We'll find you lots of books about monarchs. After Emma left for school, Lucas stood at his kitchen window with his second cup of coffee and looked across at Mara's house. The porch light was off now, but he could see movement through the kitchen window, shadows passing, the suggestion of someone awake and functioning. He'd promised to check on her, but he felt suddenly uncertain about the protocol. Was showing up too soon intrusive? Was waiting too long abandonment? He settled on finishing his coffee first, giving her space to wake fully before he appeared at her door. At 8:30, he walked across the lawn that was becoming familiar with his footsteps and knocked. Mara answered, wearing different clothes than yesterday, jeans and a navy blue sweater, her hair damp from a shower. She looked tired, dark circles under her eyes, speaking to another sleepless night. But there was something more present in her expression than the hollow shock of Friday. "Morning," she said, and stepped back to let him in without waiting for him to explain his presence. "Morning. Did you sleep?" "A few hours, more than the night before anyway." She closed the door behind him. "I made coffee. Want some?" "Sure." They moved into the kitchen, and Lucas noticed she'd already started making changes. The world's best wife mug was gone from the cabinet. Derek's protein powder and vitamins had been cleared from the counter. Small erasures, but significant in their accumulation. Mara poured coffee for both of them, her movements careful and deliberate, as if she were learning how to inhabit her own kitchen again. They sat at the table, the same seats as before, and Lucas realized they were already developing patterns. Positions claimed, rhythms established. "I called a lawyer yesterday," Mara said, "after you left. Found one online who specializes in divorce. I have a consultation Monday morning." "That's good. That's a solid first step. I also changed the locks. Had a locksmith come out last night." Derek texted asking if I'd done that, said he needed to get some things he'd forgotten. I told him to make a list and I'd pack them up. She took a sip of coffee. He didn't like that answer. I imagine he didn't. He said I was being vindictive, that I was making this harder than it needed to be. Mara's laugh was sharp. As if there's an easy way to process being left for someone else. Lucas wrapped both hands around his mug. "How did you respond?" "I didn't. I blocked his number. Figure anything he needs to say can go through lawyers." She paused. "That probably sounds petty. It sounds like self-preservation." Mara looked at him with something close to relief. "My mother called last night. She thinks I should be more mature about this. Says blocking him is childish, that I need to communicate like an adult." "Does your mother know what it feels like to be abandoned? She's been married to my father for 40 years. They still hold hands at dinner." "Then she doesn't get to judge how you handle this." Mara's eyes filled, but she blinked the tears back. "Thank you for saying that. Everyone keeps telling me how I should feel or what I should do, and I can't." "You get to do this however you need to," Lucas said firmly. "There's no right way to survive heartbreak. You just survive it." They sat in silence for a moment, the kitchen warm despite the gray light filtering through the windows. Outside, a cardinal landed on the fence, brilliant red against weathered wood, then flew away again just as quickly. "Can I ask you something?" Mara said. "Always." "How long did it take?" "After your wife left?" "How long before you felt normal again?" Lucas considered the question carefully. "I don't know if I ever felt normal again. I felt different, adapted. But normal? That person who believed in permanence and promises? He didn't survive." "That's not particularly encouraging." "You didn't ask for encouragement. You asked for truth." He set down his mug. "But here's the other truth. The person I became after is stronger than the person I was before. More realistic, less naive, but better at protecting what matters." "And what matters?" "Emma. My work. People who show up when they say they will." He paused. Truth over comfort. Mara absorbed this, her fingers tracing the rim of her coffee mug. "I don't know who I am without being Derek's wife. I've been half of a couple since I was 23. I don't know how to just be Mara." "Then that's what you figure out, one day at a time. You keep saying that, one day at a time, because it's the only way that works. You can't fix everything today. You just have to survive today. Tomorrow, you survive tomorrow. Eventually, enough days pass and you look back and realize you've built a whole new life without noticing." Mara studied him across the table. Is that what you did? More or less. Poorly at first, better as I went. Lucas leaned back in his chair. I made a lot of mistakes. Tried to date too soon because I thought that would prove I was fine. Worked too much so I wouldn't have to think. Almost lost my relationship with Emma because I was so focused on not falling apart that I forgot to actually live. What changed? Emma did. She was 4, almost 5. She came home from preschool one day and asked me why I was always sad. Said her friend's daddy laughed a lot. She wished I laughed like that. Lucas felt the old shame of that memory, dulled now, but still present. She didn't mean it as an accusation, just an observation. But it gutted me. I realized I'd been so busy surviving that I'd forgotten joy was still an option. So you just decided to be happy? No. I decided to try. Started small, making Emma laugh, finding moments to celebrate instead of just endure. Built a life around those moments instead of around my grief. Mara was quiet for a long time, processing. Then, I don't know how to do that. You don't have to know yet. Right now you just have to breathe. That's what you said Thursday night. It's still true. They finished their coffee, and Lucas helped Mara continue the work they'd started yesterday, sorting through the physical remnants of her marriage. More boxes packed, more evidence of Derek's presence systematically removed and contained. They worked mostly in silence, the kind of companionable quiet that required no filling, punctuated occasionally by Mara's questions about what to keep, what to discard, what to set aside for Derek to claim. Around noon, Lucas's phone rang. His foreman calling about a material delivery that had gotten confused. Lucas stepped outside to handle it, pacing Mara's front lawn while discussing lumber grades and installation schedules. When he came back inside, Mara had made sandwiches, turkey and Swiss on wheat bread, chips on the side, simple and domestic in a way that felt both ordinary and significant. You didn't have to do that, Lucas said. You've been here all morning helping me pack up my failed marriage. Making you lunch is literally the least I can do. They ate at the kitchen table, and Mara asked him about his work, how he'd gotten into renovation, what kinds of projects he preferred, whether he'd always worked with his hands. Lucas found himself talking more than usual, telling her about his father, who'd been a contractor, how he'd learned to frame walls and hang drywall before he learned algebra, how he'd planned to go to college for engineering, but Emma had come along unexpectedly, and suddenly college had seemed like a luxury he couldn't afford. Do you regret it? Mara asked. Not going to college? Sometimes. When I see someone my age doing work that pays better or requires less physical labor. But then I look at what I've built, literally built, with my hands, and I think maybe I got the better end of the deal. You sound like my yoga teacher philosophy, Mara said, smiling slightly. Finding meaning in the present instead of mourning what could have been. Is that what you teach? It's what I try to teach. Not sure I practice it very well myself. You're practicing it now, Lucas pointed out. You're here, functioning, moving forward. That's practice. But there is sweet poisons. After lunch, Mara admitted she was exhausted, the kind of bone-deep tired that came from processing trauma while trying to maintain basic functionality. Lucas suggested she rest while he finished packing the garage, and she didn't argue, just curled up on the couch with a blanket and let her eyes close. Lucas worked quietly, organizing tools and sporting equipment, boxing up camping gear and holiday decorations that would need to be divided eventually. He found wedding gifts still in their original boxes, never used, a fondue set, an ice cream maker, a set of crystal wine glasses too fancy for every day. Evidence of a life planned but never fully lived. He was taping up a box of Derek's golf clubs when he heard Mara moving in the house. She appeared in the garage doorway, hair mussed from sleep, looking younger and more vulnerable than she had awake. How long was I out? She asked. Lucas checked his watch. About 2 hours. You stayed the whole time. Where else would I be? She came into the garage, surveying the organized boxes, the cleared floor space. You didn't have to do all this. I know. Lucas, seriously, you've been here every day since Thursday. You have your own life. And I'm living it. This is where I choose to be. Mara looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Gratitude mixed with something else, something that might have been fear or might have been hope. I don't understand you. Not much to understand. You needed help. I'm helping. But why? Lucas set down the packing tape. Because 4 years ago, when I needed help, people showed up. My neighbor who watches Emma, she brought us dinner every night for 2 months. My crew foreman covered for me when I couldn't work. My father drove 6 hours just to sit with me while I fell apart. I didn't ask for any of it. They just showed up because that's what decent people do. He paused. Now it's my turn to show up. This isn't the same. I'm not your family. Not yet, but you could be. The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Lucas hadn't meant to say it quite that way, but he didn't take it back. There was truth in it. This strange connection forming between them felt like the beginning of something that could become family, if they let it. Mara's eyes widened. Lucas, I'm not asking for anything, he said quickly. I'm just saying, whatever this is, it matters. You matter, and I'm not going anywhere unless you tell me to. She stood very still, processing. Then, quietly, I don't want you to go. Then I'll stay. They looked at each other across the garage, surrounded by boxes of a dismantled life, and something shifted. Not romance, it was too soon for that, too raw. But recognition. An acknowledgement that they'd crossed some invisible threshold from strangers to something more permanent. The moment broke when Lucas's phone buzzed. Emma's after-school program confirming pickup time. Reality reasserting itself, demanding attention. I need to get Emma Lucas said. Of course. Go. I'm fine. You want to come with me? Get out of the house for a bit? Mara hesitated. I don't know. I look like a disaster. You look like someone who's surviving. Emma won't judge. She doesn't even know me. So introduce yourself. She's 7. She'll probably spend the whole car ride telling you about butterflies. That got a small smile. Butterflies? Monarchs, specifically. It's a whole thing. Mara glanced down at herself. Jeans, sweater, hair still messy from sleep. Give me 5 minutes to make myself presentable. She disappeared inside, and Lucas waited in the driveway, watching clouds finally begin to release their rain in a fine mist that felt more like atmosphere than weather. When Mara emerged, she'd brushed her hair and added a jacket, and she looked nervous in a way that made her seem younger, less certain. They took Lucas's truck, an old Ford with Emma's car seat in the back and a permanent smell of sawdust no amount of cleaning could eliminate. Mara climbed into the passenger seat, and Lucas noticed her taking in the details, the coffee cup in the holder, the stack of job invoices on the dashboard, the crayon drawing Emma had made taped to the visor. She draws? Mara asked, pointing at the picture. A stick figure daddy holding a smaller stick figure's hand, both surrounded by what might have been flowers or possibly explosions. Constantly. I have a folder at home with hundreds of them. Can't bring myself to throw any away. That's sweet. That's hoarding, Mara laughed. Genuine laughter that transformed her face completely. Lucas realized he'd been trying to make that happen, had been unconsciously working toward this moment where she remembered joy was still accessible. They drove through their neighborhood, past houses decorated with early Christmas lights and inflatable lawn ornaments, past the elementary school where Emma would start 3rd grade next year, past the coffee shop where Lucas bought his morning coffee when he remembered to wake up early enough. The rain intensified slightly, enough to require wipers but not enough to feel oppressive. I haven't left the house since Thursday, Mara said quietly. Except to let the locksmith in. I've been hiding. You've been processing. Same thing. Not even close. They pulled into the parking lot of Emma's after-school program, housed in a community center that smelled like old gym socks and institutional cleaning products. Lucas led Mara inside, signing Emma out at the desk while his daughter finished putting away art supplies. When Emma saw her father, her face lit up with that uncomplicated joy only children could manage. Then she noticed Mara, and her expression shifted to curiosity. Hi, Daddy. Who's that? This is Miss Mara. She's our neighbor. Mara, this is Emma. Emma walked over, studying Mara with the unself-conscious intensity of a 7-year-old. You live in the house with the really pretty garden. Mara smiled. That's me. Do you have kids? No, it's just me. Do you have a dog? I really want a dog, but Daddy says we have to wait until I'm older and can help take care of it. Lucas interjected. Emma, get your backpack. We need to head home. But Emma was already chattering away, telling Mara about her butterfly project, about how monarchs could fly all the way to Mexico, about how she was going to make the best poster in her whole class. Mara listened with genuine interest, asking questions that made Emma's enthusiasm burn even brighter. In the truck, Emma sat in her car seat between them, separated by the center console but connected by conversation. She asked Mara about yoga, what it was, whether it was hard, if you had to be able to bend in half like a pretzel. Mara answered patiently, explaining breathing and balance in terms a child could understand. "Could you teach me?" Emma asked. "I'm not very good at sitting still, but maybe yoga would help." Mara glanced at Lucas, uncertain. He nodded encouragement. "I could teach you some basics," Mara said. "If your dad says it's okay." "Please, Daddy, please?" Lucas smiled. "We'll see." When they pulled into their street, Emma asked if Mara wanted to see her butterfly books. Before Lucas could deflect, Mara said yes, and suddenly they were all walking into his house together. The transition so natural it felt almost planned. Lucas's house was smaller than Mara's, lived in and comfortable in a way that prioritized function over aesthetics. Emma's toys were neatly stored in bins but still visible. Her artwork covered the refrigerator. Her shoes were lined up by the door in descending size order as she'd outgrown them over the years. Emma dragged Mara to her room to show off her extensive collection of library books about butterflies and insects in general. Lucas stayed in the kitchen, starting dinner, spaghetti, easy and reliable, while listening to his daughter's voice carrying down the hall, animated and happy. When Mara emerged 20 minutes later, she looked lighter somehow, as if Emma's uncomplicated warmth had loosened something tight inside her. "She's wonderful," Mara said softly. "You're doing an amazing job with her. She makes it easy." "Still, single parenting is hard. You should be proud." Lucas stirred the sauce. "Stay for dinner. It's just spaghetti, nothing fancy, but there's plenty." Mara hesitated. "I don't want to intrude on your time with Emma." "You're not intruding. You're joining us. There's a difference." "Are you sure?" Emma already set 3 places at the table. "I think the decision's been made." Dinner was chaotic in the way dinners with 7-year-olds always were. Emma talked constantly, needed help cutting her spaghetti, spilled her milk, and laughed about it instead of crying. Mara helped clean up the spill, refilled Emma's glass, and engaged with the butterfly facts being recited between bites of pasta as if it were the most fascinating lecture she'd ever attended. Lucas watched them interact and felt something he hadn't expected: contentment. His house, which had always felt complete with just him and Emma, suddenly felt more complete with Mara in it, as if there had been a space he hadn't known was empty until she filled it. After dinner, Emma asked if Mara would help her with bath time, which really meant playing with bath toys and making up elaborate stories about plastic dolphins and rubber ducks. Lucas stood in the doorway, watching Mara kneel beside the tub in his small bathroom, getting her sleeves wet while Emma directed the aquatic drama, and he felt his chest constrict with something he couldn't quite name. When Emma was clean and in her pajamas, she asked Mara to read her bedtime story. They all crowded onto Emma's bed, Lucas on one side, Mara on the other, Emma between them, and took turns reading from a book about a caterpillar who was afraid to become a butterfly. "Why would she be afraid?" Emma asked. "Being a butterfly is way better than being a caterpillar." "Maybe she's afraid of change," Mara said softly. "Even when change might be good, it's still scary." Emma considered this. "But she has to change. That's what caterpillars do." "You're right. Sometimes we don't get to choose whether we change. We only get to choose how we feel about it." Lucas looked at Mara over his daughter's head and saw tears in her eyes. She was talking to Emma, but she was really talking to herself, processing her own transformation through the lens of a children's book. After Emma fell asleep, they moved quietly out of her room, leaving the door cracked and the nightlight glowing. In the living room, Mara sank onto the couch and covered her face with her hands. "I'm sorry," she said. "I didn't mean to get emotional." Lucas sat beside her. "You're allowed to get emotional. It's just, she's so innocent, so sure that change is good because it leads to butterflies. And I'm sitting here knowing that sometimes change just leads to more pain. Not always, sometimes it leads to something better." Mara lowered her hands and looked at him. "Do you really believe that?" "I have to. Otherwise, what's the point of surviving?" They sat in silence for a while, the house quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of settling wood. The rain had intensified outside, drumming against the windows with steady rhythm. "I should go," Mara said, but she didn't move. You could stay, Lucas offered. Guest room's not fancy, but it's clean. Save you from walking home in the rain. Lucas, no expectations. Just a place to sleep that isn't the house where your marriage ended. Mara's resistance crumbled visibly. Okay, thank you. Lucas showed her the guest room, sparse but functional, with clean sheets and extra blankets in the closet. He gave her a new toothbrush, a towel, one of his t-shirts to sleep in because she hadn't brought clothes. These small domesticities felt enormous, weighted with meaning beyond their practical purpose. That night, Lucas lay in his own bed listening to the rain and thinking about how quickly life could pivot. 4 days ago, Mara had been a stranger. Now she was sleeping in his guest room, had shared dinner with his daughter, had somehow become woven into the fabric of his daily existence. He didn't know what came next, didn't know if this growing connection would survive once the crisis passed and Mara found her footing again. But he knew that something fundamental had shifted, that they'd crossed from neighbors to something closer, more complicated. And he knew, with surprising certainty, that he didn't want to go backward. In the morning, Lucas woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of voices in his kitchen. He found Emma and Mara making pancakes together, his daughter standing on a step stool while Mara guided her hands on the spatula. They were laughing about something, flour dusted across both their noses, and the scene was so domestic it made Lucas's throat tight. "Daddy, we're making heart-shaped pancakes. Miss Mara showed me how." Lucas leaned against the door frame, watching them work in synchronized harmony. "I can see that. They look great." Mara glanced over, her smile soft and genuine. "Hope you don't mind. Emma wanted to surprise you." "Not even a little bit." They ate breakfast together, the three of them around Lucas's small kitchen table, and it felt like family in a way that made Lucas simultaneously hopeful and terrified. Emma chattered about school, about butterflies, about whether Miss Mara would come to her class presentation when she finished her poster. Mara promised she would if Emma's teacher said it was okay. After breakfast, after Emma had been delivered to the bus stop and Lucas had returned to find Mara washing dishes in his kitchen, they finally addressed what had been building between them for days. "This is becoming something," Mara said, her hands still in the soapy water. "Isn't it?" Lucas picked up a dish towel. "Yeah, I think it is." "I don't know if I'm ready for that." "I don't know if I am either." She rinsed a plate and handed it to him. "But I don't want to stop." "Neither do I." They worked in silence, washing and drying, the rhythm familiar despite its newness. When the last dish was dried and put away, Mara turned to face him. "What do we do now?" she asked. Lucas set down the towel. "We keep going, one day at a time, no promises, no expectations, just this. This. Whatever this becomes." Mara nodded slowly. "Okay, one day at a time. Starting with today. What's today?" "Today we finish packing your garage. Tomorrow you meet with your lawyer. Tuesday, Emma has her butterfly presentation and you're invited. We build from there. And if it falls apart, then we deal with that when it happens. But we don't run from it before it even starts." Mara looked at him for a long moment, searching his face for something she seemed to find. Then she stepped forward and hugged him, not romantically, but with the desperate grip of someone who'd been drowning and had finally found solid ground. Lucas wrapped his arms around her and held on, letting her shake against him, letting her take what she needed without asking for explanation. They stood like that in his kitchen, surrounded by the ordinary debris of breakfast, and let the moment be what it was, two broken people choosing to trust each other with their jagged edges. When they finally pulled apart, Mara wiped her eyes and laughed shakily. "Sorry, I don't know where that came from. Don't apologize for feeling things. That seems to be all I do lately." "Then you're doing it right." They spent the day moving between their two houses, finishing the garage, organizing Mara's office where Derek's presence had been minimal, making lists of things that would need to be addressed with lawyers and accountants. The work was tedious but necessary, each sorted item a small step toward reclaiming her space. By evening, when Lucas needed to collect Emma again, Mara came along without being asked. It was becoming their routine, this intertwining of lives that had started accidentally and was now developing its own gravity, pulling them together with increasing force. That night, Mara stayed for dinner again. And the night after that. By the end of the week, She had a toothbrush in Lucas's bathroom and her favorite coffee mug in his cabinet, and Emma had started saying, "when Miss Mara gets here," instead of "if Miss Mara comes over." They were building something fragile and new from the wreckage of Mara's old life. Neither of them knew where it would lead, but they were building it together, and for now, that was enough. The rhythm they'd established over those first weeks became something more permanent as November turned into December. Mara's house remained largely empty, except for the furniture she couldn't bring herself to donate yet, while Lucas's home filled with her presence in ways both obvious and subtle. Her coffee mug claimed permanent residence in his cabinet. Her yoga mat leaned against the wall by the front door. Her laughter became as familiar as the sound of Emma's footsteps on the stairs. But it was the wedding ring that proved the hardest thing to let go. Mara stood in Lucas's bathroom one Tuesday morning, turning her left hand this way and that, watching the diamond catch the light. She'd worn it for 12 years. The tan line beneath it had finally faded, but the habit of touching it remained. A nervous gesture, a reminder of who she'd been, a symbol of promises that turned out to be lies. "You okay in there?" Lucas called from the bedroom. Mara took a breath and slipped the ring off her finger. It felt both monumental and anticlimactic, this small act of severance. She set it on the bathroom counter and stared at it for a long moment, then walked out to where Lucas was buttoning his work shirt. "I took it off," she said quietly. Lucas looked at her bare hand, then at her face. "How does it feel?" "Strange, naked, right." She laughed shakily. "All of those things at once." He crossed to her and took her left hand in both of his, running his thumb over the indent the ring had left. "You don't have to keep it off if you're not ready." "I'm ready. I think I've been ready for weeks but couldn't admit it." She looked up at him. "That ring represented everything I thought I wanted. Taking it off means accepting it was never real. Or accepting that you deserve something better than what it represented." Mara leaned into him, breathing in the familiar smell of his soap and the coffee he'd already drunk. "When did you get so wise?" "I had a good teacher. She does yoga and makes terrible puns and somehow makes my daughter eat vegetables without complaining." "The vegetables are a matter of negotiation and bribery, not magic. Still counts." They stood like that for a moment, Lucas's arms around her, the morning light filtering through the window, casting everything in shades of gold. Then Emma's voice carried up the stairs, demanding to know if anyone was going to help her find her science homework, and the moment broke into the beautiful chaos of ordinary life. At breakfast, Emma noticed immediately. "Miss Mara, where's your ring?" Mara had prepared for this question, but still felt her throat tighten. "I took it off. It was from my old marriage, and that's over now." Emma considered this seriously while chewing her cereal. "So you don't love Mr. Derek anymore?" "No, sweetheart, I don't." "Good. He was mean for leaving you." "He wasn't mean exactly. We weren't right for each other." "Daddy says you're right for us, though." Mara's eyes flew to Lucas, who suddenly found his coffee extremely interesting. "He said that?" "Yep. He told Grandpa on the phone that you make our house feel complete." I wasn't supposed to be listening, but I was. Lucas cleared his throat. "Emma, we've talked about eavesdropping." "But it was a good thing I heard. Otherwise, Miss Mara wouldn't know you think she's complete." "That she makes our house feel complete," Lucas corrected, though his ears had turned red. "Different thing." Mara reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "For what it's worth, you make me feel complete too, both of you." Emma beamed. "See, Daddy? She agrees. We're all complete together." After Emma left for school, Lucas and Mara lingered over second cups of coffee, the morning stretching out before them in a rare moment of shared free time. Mara had no classes scheduled until noon, and Lucas's crew was handling a straightforward job that didn't require his presence. "I need to do something today," Mara said, turning her empty ring finger over and over. "Something that feels like moving forward instead of just surviving." What did you have in mind?" "I've been thinking about that yoga studio, the one I always wanted to open, but Derek said was too risky." Lucas set down his mug. "Tell me more." "There's a space available downtown, small but perfect. Second floor of that renovated warehouse on Market Street. The rent's reasonable, and with the money from selling my house, I could actually do it." She paused. "But it's terrifying. What if I fail? What if nobody comes? What if Derek was right and it's a terrible idea?" "What if it's a great idea and you're amazing at it and it becomes everything you dreamed. You make it sound so simple. It is simple. Not easy, but simple. You want to do this. You have the means to do it. The only thing stopping you is fear, and you've already proven you're braver than your fear. Mara looked at him, at the steady certainty in his face that had become her anchor over the past weeks. You really think I can do this? I know you can. Even if it means less money coming in for a while. Even if it means I'm stressed and overwhelmed and might be impossible to live with? Lucas laughed. Mara, you've been living through a divorce while basically moving in with a single father and his 7-year-old daughter. If you can handle that, you can handle starting a business. She felt something shift inside her. Not the dramatic transformation of before, but a quieter settling into certainty. Okay, I'm going to do it. Yeah? Yeah. Will you come look at the space with me? Right now? Why not? You said you had the morning free. They drove downtown in Lucas's truck, and Mara found herself talking faster than usual, nervous energy spilling out in plans and ideas and dreams she'd kept locked away for years. Lucas listened, occasionally asking questions that showed he was actually paying attention, not just humoring her. The warehouse space was exactly as she remembered from driving past it, countless times. Exposed brick, tall windows, hardwood floors that would be perfect for yoga. The owner, a woman in her 50s who'd renovated the building herself, showed them around with obvious pride. It's been empty for 3 months, she explained. Had a graphic design firm here before, but they outgrew it. I've been hoping to find someone who appreciates the bones of the space instead of wanting to cover everything up. Mara walked through the empty room, her footsteps echoing, her mind already filling it with possibilities. Mirrors along one wall, props stored neatly in cubbies, a small reception area by the door. Room for 12 students, maybe 15 if they were friendly. What do you think? She asked Lucas. He was examining the windows, the light they let in. I think it's perfect. Structurally sound, good bones, plenty of natural light. You'd need to add a small bathroom if you're going to have students here regularly, but that's doable. Maybe some acoustic panels to manage sound. New paint, obviously. The owner smiled. You know construction? I'm a contractor, renovations mostly. Then you'd know this is a solid space. Lucas nodded. Very solid. And underpriced for what you're offering. I'd rather have the right tenant than squeeze out every dollar. The building means something to me. I want people here who'll respect that. Mara felt tears prick her eyes, though she couldn't entirely explain why. Maybe it was the space itself, the physical manifestation of dreams she'd stopped letting herself want. Maybe it was Lucas standing beside her, supporting without taking over, offering expertise without diminishing her vision. Maybe it was simply the act of choosing something for herself instead of waiting for permission. I want it, she said. If you'll have me. The owner's smile widened. I was hoping you'd say that. Let's talk about lease terms. They spent an hour working through details. Move-in date, lease length, improvements Mara wanted to make. Lucas excused himself halfway through to take a work call, leaving Mara to negotiate on her own terms. When she finally signed the preliminary paperwork, her hand was shaking, but her signature was clear and certain. Walking out of the building, lease agreement in hand, Mara felt lighter than she had in months. Lucas was waiting by his truck, and when she held up the papers triumphantly, he pulled her into a hug that lifted her off her feet. You did it, he said against her hair. I did it. I actually did it. How do you feel? Terrified, excited, like I might throw up, but in a good way. Lucas laughed and set her down. That sounds about right for starting a business. They celebrated with lunch at a small cafe nearby, and Mara found herself sketching plans on napkins, class schedules, pricing structures, marketing ideas. Lucas contributed thoughts about renovation timelines and local contractors he trusted, but mostly he just listened, his presence a steady reminder that she wasn't doing this alone. When do you want to tell Emma? He asked. Tell her what? That you're opening a studio, that you're staying, that this is permanent. Mara set down her pen. They'd been dancing around that question for weeks, this idea of permanence. She'd been sleeping at Lucas's house more nights than not, but they'd maintained the fiction that it was temporary, that she'd eventually return to her own place, and they'd figure out what came next. Is it permanent? She asked quietly. Us, I mean, not just the studio. Lucas reached across the table and took her hand. I'd like it to be, if that's what you want. What about Emma? Have you asked her how she feels about me being around all the time? I asked her last week. She said you're the best thing that's happened to us since she learned to ride a bike without training wheels. She said that? In slightly different words. She actually said you're cool and make good snacks and don't treat her like a baby. But the sentiment was clear. Mara felt her eyes fill again. She'd been crying so much lately, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming sensation of being seen and valued and chosen. I want it to be permanent too, but Lucas, I'm still technically married. The divorce won't be final for months. Is it okay for me to be living with you? What about Emma? What will people think? I don't care what people think. My neighbors are already used to seeing you here every day. Emma's happy. You're happy. Those are the only opinions that matter. He paused. But if you're worried about propriety or what Emma might hear from other kids, we can figure something out. You could officially keep your place until the divorce is final, even if you're sleeping here most nights. That feels dishonest. Then we be honest. You're a woman who left a bad marriage and found someone who treats you right. You're living here because this is where you want to be. Anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me. Mara squeezed his hand. You make it sound so simple. It is simple. We're two adults choosing to build a life together. Everything else is just noise. That afternoon, while Emma was still at school, Lucas helped Mara measure the yoga studio space and make lists of necessary renovations. He walked her through permit requirements and introduced her to a plumber he trusted and explained the difference between various types of flooring that would work for her needs. You don't have to do all this, Mara said, watching him sketch out a simple floor plan. I can hire someone. You could. Or you could let me help because I want to and because I'm good at it. He looked up from the sketch. Unless you'd rather have professional distance. I don't want to overstep. You're not overstepping. I'm just not used to someone wanting to help without expecting something in return. I expect plenty in return, Lucas said, smiling. I expect you to keep making Emma eat vegetables. I expect you to teach me how to do that breathing thing you do when you're stressed. I expect you to stay and build this life with us. Those seem like very reasonable expectations. I thought so. They picked Emma up from school together, and on the drive home, Mara told her about the studio. You're opening a yoga place? That's so cool. Can I come? Can I take classes? I'm planning to have some classes specifically for kids your age. You'd be one of my first students. Emma bounced in her car seat with excitement. And it'll be yours? Like, you'll be the boss? I'll be the boss. Does this mean you're staying in Virginia? You're not moving away? Mara caught Lucas's eye in the rearview mirror, saw the question there. She took a breath and made the leap. I'm staying. If your dad says it's okay, I'd like to officially live with you guys. Not just visit or stay over sometimes, but actually live here. Emma's squeal could probably be heard 3 blocks away. Yes, Daddy, say yes, please, please, please. Lucas pulled into their driveway and turned to look at both of them. Yes, absolutely yes. What followed was chaos in the best way. Emma insisting they celebrate with ice cream for dinner, Lucas pointing out that vegetables should probably be involved, Mara suggesting a compromise of pizza with vegetables on top. They ended up ordering from Emma's favorite place and eating in the living room while Emma chattered about all the ways their life would be better now that Miss Mara was staying forever. Can we get a dog now? Emma asked, stretching the boundaries of the moment. Nice try, Lucas said. We talked about this. When you're 8 and can help walk it every day. But that's like a whole year away. 8 months. You can wait 8 months. What if Miss Mara wants a dog? Mara laughed. Miss Mara thinks you should listen to your dad. Emma pouted but accepted defeat gracefully, moving on to asking about yoga poses and whether she could help paint the studio walls. By the time she went to bed, she'd extracted promises of involvement in virtually every aspect of Mara's new business venture. She's going to be impossible now, Lucas said when they were alone, cleaning up the remains of dinner. You've given her something to be excited about. Is that a bad thing? No, it's perfect. He set down the dish he'd been drying and pulled Mara close. You're perfect. I'm really not. I'm a mess who cries at commercials and forgets to pay parking meters and can't cook anything more complicated than scrambled eggs. A perfect mess who makes my daughter laugh and makes my house feel like home and is brave enough to start over when everything fell apart. Mara rested her forehead against his chest. I'm scared, Lucas. About the studio, about us, about moving too fast and screwing everything up. I know, but you're doing it anyway. That's what brave means. You keep saying that I'm brave, because you keep proving it. They stood in the kitchen holding each other while the dishwasher hummed and the house settled around them, and Mara let herself feel it. The safety, the certainty, the unexpected gift of being chosen by someone who actually saw her. The next few weeks blurred together in a flurry of activity. Mara officially moved the last of her belongings from her house into Lucas's. Their house, she was learning to call it. The moving process felt different than the slow migration of the past weeks. This was intentional, permanent, a clear statement that she was staying. Her wedding ring went into a small box in the back of a drawer, not destroyed but contained, a relic of a life that no longer fit. She changed her address with the post office, transferred utilities, updated her information with the yoga studio where she currently taught. Each administrative task felt like another thread connecting her to this new life, weaving her more firmly into the fabric of their family. The yoga studio renovations began in early December. Lucas's crew worked evenings and weekends, transforming the empty warehouse space into something beautiful. They installed new lighting that could be dimmed for meditation. They built cubbies for yoga mats and blocks and straps. They painted the walls a warm cream that made the space feel peaceful and inviting. Mara spent hours there, watching the transformation, occasionally helping with tasks that didn't require specialized skills. She painted the small bathroom Lucas had roughed in. She assembled the reception desk she'd found at a secondhand furniture store. She hung curtains that could be drawn for privacy during certain classes. Emma came to help sometimes, delegated to tasks like organizing props or testing the new cushions for comfort. She took her role as assistant very seriously, creating elaborate organizational systems that made sense only to a 7-year-old, but that Mara indulged because the enthusiasm was infectious. "This is going to be the best yoga place ever," Emma declared, arranging blocks by color. "Everyone's going to want to come here." "I hope so, sweetheart." "They will. Because you're the best yoga teacher, and this is the prettiest room, and I'm going to tell everyone at school about it." Mara's grand opening was scheduled for January 3rd, giving her time to finish renovations and build anticipation without dragging it out too long. She created a simple website, ordered business cards, contacted former students from her old studio to let them know about her new venture. The response was encouraging, dozens of people expressing interest, several signing up for founding memberships before the doors even officially opened. Lucas watched her work with something like awe, though he tried to hide it. She caught him sometimes, standing in the doorway of the studio space or looking at her website on his phone, his expression soft with pride. "What?" she'd ask, self-conscious under his gaze. "Nothing. Just impressed. You've built all this in less than a month." "We built all this. I couldn't have done it without you." "You could have. It would have taken longer and cost more, but you would have figured it out." "Maybe, but I'm glad I didn't have to." One evening in mid-December, after the crew had left and Emma was at a friend's house for a sleepover, Lucas and Mara sat on the floor of the yoga studio surrounded by paint supplies and furniture still waiting to be assembled. They'd ordered Thai food and were eating straight from the containers, too tired to bother with plates. "Can I ask you something?" Mara said, setting down her pad thai. "Always. What do you tell people? About us? When they ask?" Lucas considered the question. "I tell them you're my girlfriend. Is that not right?" "No, it's right. I just wondered how you explained it. The timeline seems weird when you say it out loud. My neighbor's husband left her, so now she lives with me and we're together." "The timeline is weird," Lucas agreed, "but the story isn't. Two people found each other when they needed each other most. They helped each other heal. They fell in love. It's not complicated unless you make it complicated." "Your father doesn't think we're moving too fast?" "My father thinks you're the best thing to happen to me since Emma was born. He told me not to screw it up." Mara laughed. "Solid advice." "I thought so." Lucas set down his food and shifted to face her more directly. "But seriously, are you worried about what people think? Because if you are, we can slow down. I don't want you to feel pressured." "I'm not worried about what people think. I'm worried about what I think, or what I should think. Everything happened so fast. 6 weeks ago, I was married to someone else. Now I'm living with you and opening a business and planning a future that looks nothing like what I expected. Shouldn't I be more cautious, more careful?" Maybe. Or maybe caution is overrated when you find something real. How do you know it's real? How do you know we're not just trauma bonding or rebounding or whatever else people do when their lives fall apart? Lucas took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. Because I've been through loss before. I know what it feels like to grab onto the first person who shows you kindness because you're drowning. This isn't that. You're not a life raft, Mara. You're a partner. Someone I choose because I want to, not because I need to. And if I turn out to be a disaster, if the studio fails and I fall apart and drag you down with me, then we figure it out together. But you're not going to be a disaster. You're going to be amazing. Mara wanted to believe him, wanted to trust in this future they were building with such certainty. But doubt was a hard habit to break, worn smooth from years of practice. Derek used to say I wasn't business-minded enough, that I was too idealistic, too focused on helping people instead of making money. Derek was an idiot who didn't deserve you. But what if he was right about this? Lucas cupped her face in his hands, forcing her to meet his eyes. Listen to me. You are smart, capable, and more than qualified to run your own studio. You've been teaching yoga for 10 years. You have students who love you. You've put together a solid business plan and a beautiful space. The only person who doesn't believe in you is you. And that's going to change because I'm going to keep telling you how incredible you are until you start believing it. Mara felt tears spill over, but they were the good kind, the release of pressure she'd been holding too long. How are you so sure? Because I see you. Not the version Derek saw or the version you think you should be. I see who you actually are, strong and kind and braver than you know. And that person is going to succeed at this because she's too stubborn to fail. Stubborn? That's romantic. It's honest. You want romance? I can do that too. But right now, I think you need honesty more. He was right. She did need honesty, needed someone who would tell her the truth even when it was uncomfortable. Derek had always told her what he thought she wanted to hear, smoothing over conflicts with pleasant lies until she couldn't trust anything he said. Lucas's blunt certainty was a gift, even when it challenged her. Thank you, she said, wiping her eyes, for believing in me when I can't quite believe in myself yet. You'll get there. I've seen you grow so much in just 6 weeks. Give yourself another 6 weeks and you'll be unstoppable. They finished their dinner sitting on the floor of her studio, making plans for the grand opening and dreaming about the future. Lucas suggested she offer some free community classes to build goodwill. Mara thought about starting a weekly class specifically for people dealing with grief or major life transitions, something that honored her own journey. They talked about marketing strategies and pricing structures and how to handle the inevitable slow periods. By the time they locked up the studio and headed home, Mara felt steadier. The doubt hadn't disappeared. She suspected it might never disappear entirely. But it felt manageable now, balanced by Lucas's unwavering support and her own growing confidence. At home, they found Emma's sleepover had been canceled due to her friend coming down with a stomach bug. She'd been delivered home by the friend's apologetic mother and was now curled up on the couch watching a movie, completely unbothered by the change in plans. Hey, kiddo, Lucas said, ruffling her hair. You okay? I'm fine. Sarah's the one who's sick. Her mom said she threw up 3 times. Gross, Mara said, sitting beside her. Want company for your movie? Yes, it's the one about the chef rat. I've seen it like 1,000,000 times, but it's still good. They settled in to watch, Emma between them, Lucas's arm stretched along the back of the couch, Mara's head eventually finding its way to his shoulder. The movie played on, familiar and comforting, and Mara felt the last tension from earlier drain away. This was her life now. Thai food and paint-splattered clothes and animated movies about rats who could cook. A man who believed in her when she struggled to believe in herself. A child who'd claimed her as family with the uncomplicated certainty only children possessed. A business that terrified and excited her in equal measure. It was nothing like the life she'd planned when she married Derek at 25. It was better. As December deepened and Christmas approached, their house filled with the kind of chaos that comes with the holidays. Emma insisted on a real tree, so they spent a Saturday at a tree farm letting her pick out the perfect one, which turned out to be slightly too tall for their living room, but perfect in every other way. They strung lights and hung ornaments, many of them handmade by Emma over the years, each one carrying a story Lucas was happy to share. Mara contributed decorations she'd saved from her marriage, not the fancy ones Derek had insisted on, but the silly ones she'd bought for herself and hidden away. A ceramic elephant wearing a Santa hat, a felt llama with jingle bells, a collection of cat ornaments she'd accumulated because they made her smile. Lucas accepted them all without question, making space on the tree for her history alongside his. On Christmas Eve, they went to Lucas's father's house for dinner. Mara had met him briefly before, but this felt different, more formal, more weighted with significance. She was nervous driving over, checking her outfit multiple times and making Lucas confirm that she didn't need to bring anything besides the pie she'd attempted to bake. "He's going to love you," Lucas assured her for the third time. "Stop worrying." "What if he thinks we're moving too fast? What if he thinks I'm taking advantage of you?" "He thinks you're exactly what we needed. He told me so last week." Lucas's father lived in a small house filled with books and woodworking projects in various states of completion. He greeted them at the door with hugs for everyone, including Mara, and immediately put her at ease with his warmth and lack of judgment. "Mara, I'm so glad you could come. Lucas has told me a lot about you. All good things, I hope." "Mostly good. He mentioned you're a terrible cook, but the pie you brought looks excellent, so maybe he was exaggerating." Mara laughed, surprised into it. "I'm a disaster in the kitchen. The pie is from a bakery, and I'm not ashamed to admit it." Smart woman, never pretend competence you don't have. Leads to disappointment all around. Dinner was relaxed and full of laughter. Emma dominated much of the conversation, telling her grandfather about the yoga studio and the birdhouse they were planning to build together, and the dog she would definitely be getting in 8 months. Lucas's father listened with the kind of attention that made Emma glow, asking follow-up questions and treating her opinions as valuable. After dinner, while Emma helped her grandfather with dishes, Lucas and Mara stepped outside onto the back porch. The night was cold and clear, stars bright overhead, their breath visible in the air. "Your dad's wonderful," Mara said. "He likes you, I can tell." "How can you tell?" "He gave you the chair at dinner, the one that was my mom's. He only does that for people he considers family." Mara felt her throat tighten. "Lucas, I know it's fast. I know we're still figuring things out. But I need you to know something." He took her hands in his. "I'm in love with you. Completely, terrifyingly in love with you. And I know you're still processing your divorce and building your business, and probably not ready to hear this. But I needed to say it. You should know how I feel." Mara looked at his face in the starlight, at the vulnerability and certainty there, and felt something click into place inside her. "I love you too," she said, and was surprised by how easy the words came. "I've been afraid to admit it, afraid I was confusing gratitude with love or need with want. But it's real. I love you." Lucas pulled her close and kissed her, and Mara kissed him back with the full knowledge of what it meant. This wasn't escape or rebound or desperate grasping. This was choice. This was partnership. This was love built on honesty and daily choosing and showing up even when it was hard. When they pulled apart, both of them were grinning like idiots. "So," Lucas said, "now that we've established that we're stupidly in love with each other, any thoughts on what comes next?" "We keep building. We keep choosing each other. We see where this goes." "That sounds perfect." They went back inside to find Emma and Lucas's father building a gingerbread house with the kind of structural engineering discussion only two people who loved building things could have. Emma insisted Mara help with the decorating, and they spent the next hour creating a monstrosity covered in enough candy to give everyone cavities just from looking at it. Driving home that night, Emma fell asleep in the back seat within 5 minutes. Lucas carried her inside and upstairs while Mara followed, both of them moving quietly through the familiar routine of getting her ready for bed. They tucked her in together, and when Lucas's hand found Mara's in the hallway, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. In their room, she'd stopped thinking of it as Lucas's room weeks ago. They got ready for bed with the comfortable synchronization of people who'd learned each other's rhythms. Lucas set his alarm while Mara braided her hair. She plugged in her phone while he checked the locks downstairs one last time. When they finally settled into bed, Lucas pulled her close, and she fit against him perfectly, her head on his chest, his arm around her shoulders. "Merry Christmas," he murmured. "It's not Christmas yet. Still got 45 minutes. "Close enough?" Mara smiled in the darkness. "Merry Christmas, Lucas." She fell asleep listening to his heartbeat, steady and sure. and for the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt no fear about tomorrow. Whatever came next, they would face it together. And that was enough. The morning Mara woke up and realized she'd slept through the entire night without crying felt like a small miracle. She lay in Lucas's guest room, though it had stopped feeling like a guest room weeks ago and had become simply her room, and listened to the house coming alive around her. Emma's footsteps padding down the hall, Lucas's deeper tread following, the sound of the coffee maker sputtering to life in the kitchen. She'd been staying here more nights than not for the past month, returning to her own house only to check mail and maintain the illusion of independence. But the truth was, she didn't want to be independent anymore. Not in the way that meant sleeping alone in a house full of ghosts, eating dinner in silence, waking up to emptiness. The divorce papers had been filed 3 weeks ago. Derek had signed without contest, apparently eager to make things official with Jennifer. Mara's lawyer said it would be finalized within 6 months, maybe less if Derek continued being cooperative. The house would be sold, assets divided, the legal dissolution of 12 years completed with surprising efficiency. Mara got out of bed and pulled on the robe she kept hanging on the back of the door. Another small claim to permanence in this space that wasn't quite hers, but didn't feel temporary either. She found Lucas and Emma in the kitchen, engaged in their morning debate about whether chocolate chips constituted a legitimate breakfast food. "They're basically fruit," Emma argued, her logic questionable but delivered with absolute conviction. "Chocolate comes from cacao beans, and beans are vegetables, so chocolate chips are vegetables." Lucas caught Mara's eye over his daughter's head, his expression torn between amusement and parental responsibility. "That's not how nutrition works, sweetheart." "But you let me have them in pancakes sometimes." "Pancakes also have eggs and milk and flour. That's different than eating chocolate chips straight from the bag." "What if I eat them with a banana? Then it's balanced." Mara laughed, moving to pour herself coffee. "She's got a point about the banana." "Don't encourage her," Lucas said, but he was smiling. "Fine. Banana and exactly 1 handful of chocolate chips. But you're eating real lunch at school." Emma pumped her fist in victory and immediately began constructing her breakfast masterpiece. Mara settled into her usual chair at the table, the one that had somehow become hers over the past month, and watched the easy rhythm between father and daughter with something that felt dangerously close to belonging. "Sleep okay?" Lucas asked, sliding a plate of toast in front of her. "Actually, yes. All the way through." He smiled, and she knew he understood the significance. "That's good. That's really good." After Emma left for school, Lucas and Mara lingered over coffee in that comfortable silence they'd developed, not awkward, not forced, just two people existing in the same space without needing to fill it with noise. Finally, Lucas set down his mug and looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "I've been thinking about something," he said. "That sounds ominous." "Not ominous. Just, I want to take you somewhere." Mara raised an eyebrow. "Where?" "It's a surprise, but it would mean being gone for 3 days, Friday through Sunday. My dad can watch Emma. She loves staying at his place. But only if you want to. No pressure." "3 days where?" "If I tell you, it ruins the surprise." Mara's first instinct was to say no. The idea of leaving for 3 days felt too big, too much like a real relationship milestone instead of the undefined thing they'd been carefully maintaining. But then she looked at Lucas's face, saw the hope and uncertainty there, and realized she didn't want to say no. "Okay," she said. "Yes, I trust you." "Yeah?" "Yeah." Lucas's smile transformed his entire face. "Okay, good. Pack warm clothes and comfortable shoes, that's all I'm saying." "You're really not going to tell me?" "Nope. What if I hate surprises?" "Do you?" Mara considered. "No, actually. I just like pretending to be difficult." "I've noticed." She threw a dish towel at him, which he caught easily, and the moment dissolved into laughter that felt light and uncomplicated. Later, after Lucas left for a job site and Mara was alone in the house, she realized she was excited, actually genuinely excited about something for the first time since Derek had left. The next few days passed in a blur of preparation and anticipation. Mara packed and repacked her small suitcase, unsure what warm clothes and comfortable shoes meant in terms of destination. She told her yoga studio she'd be gone for the weekend, arranged for a neighbor to water the plants at her house, and tried not to overthink what 3 days away with Lucas might mean for the careful balance they'd been maintaining. Emma was thrilled about staying with her grandfather, who apparently had a workshop full of power tools and let her help build things that Lucas deemed questionable from a safety standpoint, but character building. On Friday morning, Lucas dropped Emma off first, then came back to collect Mara. "Last chance to back out," he said, loading her suitcase into his truck. "Not a chance. I'm committed now." "Good." They drove west, out of Virginia and into the mountains. Lucas had made a playlist, carefully curated songs that ranged from classic rock to newer indie artists Mara had never heard of. They talked about everything and nothing, the conversation flowing easily between deep discussions about family and childhood and lighter topics like Emma's latest obsession with learning magic tricks. "She made me sit through a 20-minute performance last week," Lucas said, grinning at the memory. "Every single trick was just her hiding a quarter in her hand and then finding it behind my ear. But she was so proud of herself I had to act amazed every single time. That's adorable. That's fatherhood, pretending to be surprised by the same trick 17 times in a row. You're really good at it, being her dad." Lucas glanced over at her. "Thanks. I'm just making it up as I go, honestly. Hoping I'm not screwing her up too badly." "You're not. She's happy, confident, kind. That doesn't happen by accident. She asks about you, wants to know if you're going to keep living with us." Mara's heart stuttered. "What do you tell her?" "That I hope so, but that it's your choice." They drove in silence for a moment, that statement hanging between them with all its weight and possibility. Finally, Mara said quietly, "I hope so too." Lucas reached over and took her hand, threading their fingers together in a gesture that had become familiar over the past weeks. They'd been careful about physical affection, nothing more than hand-holding and occasional hugs, both of them aware that Mara was still technically married, still processing the end of her previous life. But this felt different, not rushed, but intentional. After 4 hours of driving, Lucas pulled off the highway onto a smaller road that wound up into the mountains. The landscape changed as they climbed, bare trees giving way to evergreens, houses becoming sparse, civilization feeling increasingly distant. Finally, he turned onto a gravel driveway that led to a small cabin nestled among pine trees. "We're here," he announced. Mara stared at the cabin. It was beautiful in a rustic way. Wood siding weathered to silver gray, a stone chimney, windows that reflected the surrounding forest. "Where is here?" "Shenandoah. My dad owns this place. Built it himself when I was a kid. He lets me use it sometimes when I need to think." "It's beautiful." "Wait until you see the view from the back deck." Lucas was right. The back deck looked out over a valley, mountains rising in layers of blue and green and gray, clouds catching on the peaks like cotton. Mara stood at the railing, breathing in air that tasted clean and cold, and felt something tight in her chest begin to loosen. "I thought you might need this," Lucas said, coming to stand beside her. "Distance from everything, space to breathe." "How did you know?" "Because I needed it too once. After my ex left, my dad brought me up here for a week. Told me to chop wood and think and figure out who I was going to be moving forward." He paused. "It helped." Mara turned to look at him. "And who did you decide to be?" "Someone who shows up, someone who keeps promises, someone who builds things instead of running from them." "I like who you decided to be." "Good. Because he's pretty invested in you." They went inside, and Mara discovered the cabin was small but perfectly appointed. One bedroom with a loft that could sleep extra guests, a kitchen with a wood-burning stove, a living room with comfortable furniture, and shelves full of books. It felt like a place designed for healing, for quiet contemplation, for remembering what mattered. "There are 2 beds," Lucas said, gesturing to the bedroom and then the loft. "You can have whichever you want. No expectations, no pressure. This weekend is about giving you space, not taking it away." Mara set down her suitcase. "What if I don't want space?" Lucas went very still. "Mara, I know I'm not divorced yet. I know this is complicated, but Lucas, I'm so tired of being careful. I'm tired of protecting myself from feeling things because I'm afraid they'll hurt. You've been nothing but steady and kind and patient, and She took a breath. "I want to stop being afraid." You don't have to rush anything for my sake. Well, I'm not rushing for you. I'm choosing for me. She crossed the space between them and took his hands. I know who I want to be moving forward. Someone brave enough to try again. Someone who believes good things can still happen. Someone who trusts that not everyone leaves. Lucas cupped her face in his hands, his thumb brushing her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. I'm not going anywhere. Promise? Promise. He kissed her then, soft and careful, asking permission with every movement. Mara kissed him back and felt the last defensive wall she'd been maintaining crumble completely. This wasn't the passion of new love or the desperation of rebound. This was something steadier, built on weeks of shared mornings and quiet evenings and the slow accumulation of trust. When they finally pulled apart, Mara was crying, but not from sadness. Sorry, I don't know why I'm crying. Because you're letting go, Lucas said, wiping tears from her cheeks. Of the person you were before. Of the marriage that ended. Of the fear that you'll never be whole again. When did you get so wise? I had a good teacher, learned from watching caterpillars turn into butterflies. Mara laughed through her tears. Emma's book. Emma's book. They spent the afternoon exploring the area around the cabin, walking trails that wound through pine forests, finding a stream that ran clear and cold over smooth stones, climbing to a viewpoint that made Mara feel like she could see the whole world spread out below them. Lucas pointed out landmarks, told stories about visiting this place as a child, shared memories that let Mara understand the shape of his life before she'd entered it. That evening, they cooked dinner together in the cabin's small kitchen, pasta with vegetables, simple and satisfying. They ate on the deck despite the cold, wrapped in blankets and watching the sun set over the mountains in shades of orange and pink and purple that seemed too vivid to be real. I haven't felt this peaceful in months, Mara admitted. Maybe years. Good, that's what this place is for. Lucas, can I ask you something? Always. That list I made, of places I wanted to see but never let myself want, do you remember? I remember. I was thinking maybe we could do that. Not right away, but someday. Start checking things off together. Lucas smiled. I'd like that. Where do you want to start? Somewhere with an ocean? I've never seen the ocean. Derek always said beach vacations were boring, so we never went. Then we'll go to the ocean. We'll take Emma. She'd love it. The ease with which he included his daughter, the assumption that their future would be shared, made Mara's chest feel warm. You really mean that? About building something together? I really mean that. That night, they stayed up late talking by the wood stove, drinking wine and sharing stories about their childhoods, their dreams, their fears. Lucas told her about his mother who died when he was 16 and how he still missed her most during holidays. Mara told him about the baby she'd wanted, but Derek had kept postponing, and how she'd finally accepted it wasn't going to happen. You could still have that, Lucas said carefully. If you wanted, you're only 34. Is that something you'd want, more kids? Honestly, I don't know. I love Emma more than anything, but the idea of starting over with diapers and sleepless nights sounds exhausting. He paused. But if it mattered to you, I'd consider it. It doesn't have to matter right now. We have time to figure it out. We do, Lucas agreed. All the time we need. They fell asleep on the couch together, tangled in blankets and each other, and Mara woke in the middle of the night to find herself wrapped in Lucas's arms. For the first time since Derek had left, she didn't feel the panic of being alone. She felt safe, chosen, home. The next day, Lucas took her to a small town nearby where they wandered through antique shops and a farmer's market, buying fresh bread and local honey and handmade candles that smelled like pine and cinnamon. They had lunch at a diner where everyone seemed to know Lucas by name, and he introduced Mara as someone important, which made her feel seen in a way Derek never had. You come here often? Mara asked after the waitress had left with their orders. My dad and I used to come up every few months. After my mom died, it was our thing. A way to connect without having to talk about feelings directly. Very guy of you, Lucas grinned. We're emotionally stunted, but physically competent. It's our brand. I like your brand. Good, because you're stuck with it now. After lunch, they drove to a lake that Lucas said was beautiful even in late autumn. The water was steel gray under cloudy skies, surrounded by trees that had lost most of their leaves. They walked along the shore, and Lucas told her about swimming here as a kid, about the rope swing his dad had built that was probably still there somewhere, rotted but standing. "I want to show you something," Lucas said, leading her to a particular spot where the shore curved and a flat rock jutted out over the water. They sat on the rock together, legs dangling, and Lucas was quiet for a long moment before speaking. "This is where I came after my ex left. My dad brought me here and told me to throw a rock for every promise she'd broken, said I needed to physically let it go or it would eat me alive. Did it help? Not immediately, but eventually, yeah. It helped me understand that I could choose what to carry and what to release." Mara understood what he was offering. Permission to grieve, to rage, to let go of the weight she'd been carrying. She picked up a smooth stone from beside her and turned it over in her hand. "For the 12 years I gave someone who was planning his exit," she said, and threw the stone into the lake. It disappeared with a quiet splash. She picked up another. "For believing I wasn't enough." Another splash. "For every time I made myself smaller so he could feel bigger." She kept going, throwing stone after stone, each one carrying a specific hurt or betrayal or moment of self-abandonment. Lucas sat beside her, occasionally handing her another rock, bearing witness without trying to fix or minimize or rush her through the process. Finally, she picked up one last stone and held it for a long time. "What's that one for?" Lucas asked gently. "For the person I was before. The one who thought love meant sacrifice instead of partnership." She looked at the stone, then at Lucas. "I'm letting her go too. She deserved better, but she didn't know how to ask for it." She threw the final stone, and it arced high before falling into the water with a satisfying splash. Mara felt lighter, as if each stone had carried actual weight. She turned to Lucas and found him watching her with an expression so tender it made her throat tight. "Thank you," she said, "for bringing me here, for knowing what I needed before I did." "You're welcome. Lucas, I need to tell you something." "Okay." "I'm falling in love with you. I know that's probably too fast or too complicated or too something, but it's true and I needed to say it." Lucas was quiet for a moment, and Mara felt panic rising. Had she said too much, pushed too hard, moved too fast? But then he smiled, that soft smile that transformed his whole face, and pulled something from his jacket pocket. It was a small velvet box. Mara's breath caught. "Lucas, wait. Before you say anything, let me explain." He opened the box to reveal a simple ring, silver with a small aquamarine stone. "This was my mother's. My dad gave it to me years ago, said to save it for someone who mattered. I've been carrying it around for 2 weeks, trying to figure out the right time to ask you this." "Ask me what?" "Mara Collins, I know your divorce isn't final yet. I know we've only known each other for a few months. I know this is fast and probably crazy and definitely not how these things are supposed to go." He took a breath. "But I also know that I love you, that I want to build a life with you, that I want to wake up to you in my house every morning and teach Emma about commitment and partnership by showing her what it looks like when two people choose each other every day." Mara's eyes filled with tears. "I'm not asking you to marry me today," Lucas continued. "I'm asking you to marry me someday, when you're ready. When the paperwork is final and you've had time to heal and you're sure this is what you want. This ring is a promise that I'll wait as long as you need, that I'm not going anywhere, that I choose you, Mara, not as a rescue or a rebound, but as a partner, as family." "You're sure?" Mara whispered. "Because I come with a lot of baggage. A failed marriage, trust issues, fear that I'll wake up one day and you'll have changed your mind." "I'm sure. And you're not baggage. You're someone who survived heartbreak and came out stronger. Someone brave enough to try again even when it's terrifying. Someone who makes my daughter laugh and my house feel like home." He paused. "Someone I want to spend the rest of my life choosing." Mara looked at the ring, then at Lucas's face, and felt the last piece of her broken heart click back into place. "Yes. Yes? Yes, I'll marry you, someday, when I'm ready and the time is right and we've figured out all the complicated logistics. But yes, absolutely yes." Lucas slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her, and then he was kissing her, and she was crying and laughing at the same time, and the lake spread out before them like a promise of things to come. They stayed at the cabin one more night, but everything felt different now. Not the desperate urgency of new passion, but the steady certainty of commitment. They made plans sitting by the fire, where they'd live once Mara's house sold, how to tell Emma what their life might look like in 1 year, 5 years, 10. "I want to open that yoga studio," Mara said. "I've been thinking about it more seriously. With the money from the house, I could actually do it." "Then you should do it. Even if it means less income for a while, less stability, we'll make it work. I believe in you." Such simple words, but they carried the weight of everything Mara had been missing in her marriage: partnership, support, belief that her dreams mattered as much as his. Sunday came too soon. They packed up the cabin, erasing evidence of their presence, except for a new entry in the guest book Lucas's father kept. Lucas wrote their names and the date, and Mara added, "The weekend everything changed." The drive home felt different than the drive up. They were different, engaged, committed, building toward a future instead of just surviving the present. They talked about the logistics of combining households, about what to tell Emma and when, about how to navigate the remaining months until Mara's divorce was final. "Are you nervous?" Lucas asked as they neared their neighborhood. "About telling Emma?" "Terrified. What if she's not ready? What if she thinks I'm trying to replace her mother?" "She won't think that. She loves you. But we'll take it slow. Let her set the pace." They pulled into Lucas's driveway just as his father's truck arrived with Emma. She burst out of the vehicle like a rocket, running toward them with a backpack bouncing on her shoulders and something clutched in her hands. "Daddy! Miss Mara! Look what Grandpa and I made!" It was a birdhouse, painted bright blue with yellow flowers around the entrance hole. Slightly lopsided, but clearly made with love and enthusiasm. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," Lucas said, crouching down to examine it. "Grandpa says we can hang it in the backyard and maybe we'll get chickadees or nuthatches or maybe even a bluebird." Emma's excitement was contagious. Then she noticed Mara's hand, noticed the ring catching the late afternoon light. "Miss Mara, that's a pretty ring. Is it new?" Lucas and Mara exchanged a look. They'd planned to wait, to find the perfect moment, but Emma was looking at them with such open curiosity that the perfect moment suddenly seemed to be right now. "It is new," Mara said, kneeling down to Emma's level. "Your dad gave it to me this weekend." Emma's eyes went wide. "Like a marry ring?" "Like an engage ring," Lucas corrected gently, "which means that someday when Miss Mara is ready, we're going to get married and become a family. All three of us together. But only if you're okay with that." Emma looked between them, processing. "Would Miss Mara live here all the time, not just sometimes?" "Yes," Mara said, "all the time. If that's okay with you." "Would you be my mom?" The question hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Mara chose her words carefully. "I would be someone who loves you very much and wants to help take care of you. You have a mom who gave birth to you, and nothing changes that. But I could be someone else who loves you like a mom if you want that." Emma considered this seriously. "Like a bonus mom?" "Exactly like that." "Okay, I think that's good." Then, with the mercurial nature of 7-year-olds, Emma's attention shifted. "Can we hang up my birdhouse now?" Lucas laughed, relief evident in his voice. "Absolutely. Let's hang up your birdhouse." They spent the evening as a family, the first time Mara consciously thought of them that way. They hung the birdhouse in the backyard, made dinner together, watched Emma's favorite movie about a princess who saved herself instead of waiting for rescue. When Emma finally went to bed, Mara and Lucas stood in the hallway outside her room, listening to her breathing settle into sleep. "That went better than expected," Mara whispered. "She loves you. I told you she would be okay. Bonus mom, I like that." Lucas pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. "Me too." That night, Mara moved her things from the guest room into Lucas's room. Not a dramatic gesture, just a quiet acknowledgement that they were done pretending she lived anywhere else. She hung her clothes in the closet next to his, put her books on the nightstand, claimed her side of the bed. As they lay in the darkness, Lucas reached for her hand and found the ring on her finger. "No regrets?" he asked. "Not even one." "Good, because I'm planning on making you very happy for a very long time." "That sounds like a threat." "It's a promise." Mara turned toward him, close enough to see his face in the dim light from the hallway. "I love you, Lucas Reed." "I love you too, Mara Collins. Soon to be Reed, if you want." I want. They fell asleep tangled together, and when Mara woke in the middle of the night, she didn't feel the panic she'd grown accustomed to. Instead, she felt Lucas breathing beside her, heard Emma's soft snores from down the hall, and realized she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The next morning, Mara called her lawyer and asked about finalizing the divorce as quickly as possible. She called the real estate agent about listing her house. She called her sister and told her about the engagement, weathering the squeals and questions and inevitable concerns about moving too fast. "Are you sure?" her sister asked. "You're not just rebounding?" "I'm sure. More sure than I've ever been about anything." "Then I'm happy for you. You deserve this." Mara hung up and looked around Lucas's kitchen. Her kitchen now, really. Emma's artwork on the fridge, Lucas's coffee mug in the sink, her yoga mat rolled up by the door. Evidence of a life being built from nothing but choice and commitment and love. She thought about the caterpillar in Emma's bedtime story, the one who was afraid to change. She understood that fear had lived it for months. But she also understood now that change was how you became something better, how you grew wings and learned to fly. The mailbox key that had started everything sat in the bowl by the front door, returned but kept as a reminder. Mara picked it up, running her thumb over the familiar metal, and smiled at how something so small had led to something so enormous. Then she put it back and went to find Lucas, who was in the backyard with Emma, both of them staring up at the birdhouse with binoculars, waiting for their first visitor. Mara stood in the doorway watching them, her family, chosen and real and permanent, and felt her heart, once broken, now whole. The birdhouse remained empty for 3 days, a source of endless fascination and mild disappointment for Emma, who checked it every morning before school with binoculars that were comically too large for her small face. On the 4th morning, she burst into the kitchen where Lucas and Mara were making breakfast, her excitement barely contained. "There's a bird! A real bird! Come look!" They abandoned the eggs on the stove and followed Emma outside, all 3 of them crowding around to watch a small chickadee investigate the entrance hole. It hopped around the roof, peered inside, flew away, then returned with what looked like a piece of moss in its beak. "She's building a nest," Mara whispered, not wanting to startle it. "She chose your house, Emma." Emma's face glowed with pride. "Because I made it with love. Grandpa said things made with love attract good things." Lucas met Mara's eyes over his daughter's head, and she saw the same thought reflected there, that maybe his father was right, that maybe love did attract good things, that maybe their whole story was proof of that principle. The weeks that followed settled into a rhythm that felt both new and ancient, as if they'd been living this way for years instead of months. Mara's house sold faster than expected to a young couple expecting their first child, and she found herself surprisingly unbothered by watching strangers walk through rooms that had once held her entire life. The space had already stopped being home the night Lucas had stayed to make her coffee. The divorce papers arrived on a Tuesday in March, official and final. Mara signed them in Lucas's kitchen while Emma was at school, her hand steady despite the magnitude of what the signature meant. Lucas sat across from her, silent support, his presence alone enough to keep her grounded. "How do you feel?" he asked when she set down the pen. Mara considered the question carefully. "Free. Sad for what I thought I had but didn't. Grateful it's finally over." She looked at the aquamarine ring on her finger, the one that had migrated from her right hand to her left without discussion or ceremony. "Ready to start the next chapter?" "Good. Because I've been thinking about something." "Should I be worried?" Lucas smiled. "Depends. How do you feel about getting married in June?" Mara's heart skipped. "June? That's 3 months away. I know it's fast, but your divorce is final now. We're already living together. Emma knows and is excited. Why wait?" "Because normal people get engaged for at least a year, plan big weddings, send out fancy invitations. We're not normal people. We're 2 people who found each other in the wreckage and built something beautiful. Why should our wedding be anything other than exactly what we want it to be?" Mara felt a smile spreading across her face. "What do we want it to be?" "Small, intimate, maybe at the cabin, just family and close friends. Emma can be the flower girl, my dad can officiate. He got ordained online years ago for a friend's wedding. We make it ours instead of trying to fit someone else's template." The vision he painted was so different from Mara's first wedding, The massive church ceremony, 300 guests, the overwhelming production that had felt more like performance than promise. This sounded like something real, something honest. June, she said, testing the word. That's when the wildflowers bloom at the cabin. Exactly. And Emma's okay with this timeline? Emma asked me yesterday why we hadn't gotten married yet. Said she was ready for you to be her bonus mom officially? Mara's eyes filled with the easy tears that still came when she thought about Emma's unconditional acceptance. Then yes, let's get married in June. Lucas stood and pulled her into his arms, and Mara breathed in the familiar smell of sawdust and coffee that had become synonymous with safety. I love you, he murmured against her hair. I love you too. The planning happened quickly, but without stress, mainly because they kept everything deliberately simple. Mara's sister would come from North Carolina with her family. Lucas's father was already involved. A few friends from Mara's yoga studio, some of Lucas's crew, Emma's teacher who'd become a friend. No more than 30 people total. Mara bought a dress from a small boutique in Charlottesville, cream-colored and simple, with lace sleeves and a flowing skirt that would move beautifully in the mountain breeze. Emma picked out her flower girl dress herself, insisting on purple because it was a princess color, and she wanted to feel fancy. What about rings? Mara asked one evening as they sat on the back porch watching Emma play with the neighbor's dog. Already handled, Lucas said. My dad still has my mother's wedding band. He gave it to me years ago. And I've got my grandfather's ring from my dad's side. They're simple, but they've lasted through real marriages. Figured that was good luck. Your family just has rings ready to go? My family believes in being prepared and in marriage. My grandparents were together 53 years before my grandfather died. My parents would have made it that long if my mom hadn't gotten sick. That's a lot to live up to. Lucas shook his head. It's not about living up to anything. It's about choosing each other every day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. And you think we can do that? I know we can. We already have been. Mara leaned her head on his shoulder. I'm going to be a wife again. That's strange to think about. You're going to be my wife. That's the only part that matters. Your wife who's opening a yoga studio and might be terrible at business. The studio had become real in the past month. Mara had found a space to lease in a renovated warehouse downtown, signed the papers, started planning classes and hiring instructors. The grand opening was scheduled for July, 1 month after the wedding. It terrified and exhilarated her in equal measure. You're not going to be terrible, Lucas said. You're going to be great. And if you're not, we'll figure it out together. We. I'm still getting used to that word meaning something I can count on. Better get used to it. You're stuck with me for the next 53 years minimum. Only 53? Fine. 60. But that's my final offer. Mara laughed, and the sound carried across the yard where Emma was now attempting to teach the dog to roll over. The scene was so perfectly ordinary, so unremarkably domestic, that Mara had to fight back tears. This was her life now. Not the performance she'd been living before, but something real and messy and infinitely more valuable. April brought spring in earnest, Bradford pear trees blooming white along their street, tulips pushing through soil in the garden Mara had started planting in what was now officially their shared yard. She'd sold most of her furniture when her house closed, keeping only pieces that held real meaning. The rest merged seamlessly into Lucas's home, or rather, their home. Mara had officially changed her mailing address, updated her driver's license, told the utility companies. Small bureaucratic acts that felt monumental in their permanence. Emma's butterfly project had long since concluded with an A+ and a spot of honor on the refrigerator, but her interest in metamorphosis continued. She'd somehow convinced Lucas and Mara to help her order caterpillars through a mail-order science kit, and now they had a mesh habitat in the living room where 5 caterpillars were industriously eating and growing. This one's name is Sparkle, Emma announced, pointing at the largest caterpillar. And that's Rainbow, and that's Princess, and that's Unicorn, and that's Steve. Steve? Mara asked, trying not to laugh. He looks like a Steve. When the caterpillars became a daily ritual, checking on them before school, after school, before bed. Emma documented their growth in a journal with careful drawings and misspelled observations. When the first one formed its chrysalis, she called both Mara and Lucas to come witness immediately, as if they were observing a miracle. It's happening. It's really happening. She's changing. They stood together watching the caterpillar hang in a J shape, its body already beginning the transformation that would turn it into something completely different. Mara thought about her own transformation, how she'd had to break down completely before she could rebuild into someone stronger. "How long until they're butterflies?" Emma asked. "About 2 weeks," Mara said. "Sometimes less, sometimes more. Depends on the butterfly." "And then they fly away?" "Then we let them go, yes." Emma's face fell slightly. "But I'll miss them." Lucas knelt beside his daughter. "That's part of loving things, sweetheart. Sometimes you have to let them go so they can become what they're meant to be." "But what if I don't want to?" "Then you remember that you gave them a safe place to change, that you were part of their story, and you feel proud of that instead of sad." Emma considered this seriously. "Can we at least take pictures before we let them go?" "Absolutely. We'll document everything." By mid-May, all 5 caterpillars had formed chrysalises, hanging like jade teardrops in their mesh home. Emma checked them obsessively, watching for the first signs of wings forming inside the translucent shells. The wedding was 4 weeks away, and the house hummed with overlapping anticipation, butterflies emerging, vows being written, families preparing to gather. Mara's mother called one evening, her voice carrying the weight of things unsaid. They'd spoken only sporadically since the divorce, their relationship strained by Mara's mother's insistence that she should have tried harder to save her marriage. "I wanted to let you know I'll be at your wedding," her mother said, the words coming out stiff. "Your father and I will both be there." "Thank you, that means a lot." A pause. Then quieter. "I'm sorry I wasn't more supportive. When Derek left, when you were hurting, I should have been better." Mara felt tears prick her eyes. "I understand you didn't know what to say. That's no excuse. You're my daughter. I should have shown up anyway." Another pause. "This Lucas, he's good to you?" "He's wonderful to me." To Emma. "He makes me feel safe and valued and loved." "Then I'm glad. You deserve that. I'm sorry I made you feel like you didn't." After they hung up, Mara sat with the phone in her lap, processing the unexpected apology. Lucas found her like that and pulled her into his arms without asking questions, just holding her until she was ready to explain. "My mom apologized," she said against his chest. "That's good, right?" "It's unexpected. Good, but unexpected. People can surprise you. Sometimes they grow too." "Like caterpillars." "Like caterpillars." The first butterfly emerged on a Tuesday morning while Emma was at school. Lucas texted Mara at the studio, and she closed early to come home and witness it. They stood together watching the butterfly pump fluid into its wings, watching the crumpled orange and black pattern expand and strengthen and become flight-worthy. "Steve's a girl," Lucas observed, looking at the wing pattern. "Emma's going to be devastated she missed this." "We'll take video for her. She can watch it 100 times. The butterfly, Steve, took her time drying, hanging motionless while her wings hardened. Mara found herself mesmerized by the process, by the patience required, by the trust that the transformation would complete itself without interference. "You ready for this?" Lucas asked, and Mara knew he wasn't talking about the butterfly. "The wedding?" "All of it. The wedding, the studio opening, becoming Emma's bonus mom officially. It's a lot of change happening at once." Mara watched Steve's wings begin to flutter experimentally. "I'm ready. Nervous, but ready. What about you?" "I've been ready since the night I came to return your mailbox key and stayed to make you coffee instead." "That feels like a lifetime ago." 4 months, longest and shortest 4 months of my life. They released Steve the next morning with Emma present, opening the mesh habitat in the backyard and watching her take her first tentative flight. She circled once, twice, then flew higher and disappeared into the trees. Emma cried a little, but she was smiling through the tears. "She's free," Emma said. "She gets to be what she was always supposed to be." Over the next week, the remaining 4 butterflies emerged in a cascade of transformations. They released each one with ceremony, Emma taking pictures and making wishes and naming the specific flowers she hoped they'd visit. The last one, Princess, lingered on Mara's finger before flying away, and Emma declared it was a sign that the wedding would be perfect. "How do you figure?" Lucas asked. "Because butterflies are good luck, and Princess blessed Miss Mara. That means she's going to be happy forever." Mara caught Lucas's eye and saw her own hope reflected there. Maybe Emma was right. Maybe blessing came in small, unexpected forms: a butterfly's trust, a child's certainty, a man who made coffee and stayed. The week before the wedding arrived with chaotic momentum. Family members began arriving at hotels near the cabin. Mara's sister came 2 days early to help with final preparations, bringing her husband and 3 children who immediately bonded with Emma over shared enthusiasm for bugs and mud. "You look happy," Mara's sister observed as they arranged wildflowers in mason jars that would serve as centerpieces. "I am happy. Is that allowed?" "It's mandatory. I'm just glad you found someone who knows what you're worth." "Me too." Lucas's father arrived and immediately conscripted Lucas and his crew into helping set up chairs and tables on the cabin's back deck. The venue was perfect, intimate and surrounded by mountains, with wildflowers blooming exactly as Lucas had promised. They'd rented a small tent in case of rain, but the forecast showed nothing but sunshine. The night before the wedding, they followed tradition by staying apart. Mara stayed at the cabin with her sister and mother, while Lucas took Emma to his father's house 15 minutes down the mountain. Emma protested the separation until Lucas reminded her that traditions made ceremonies feel special. "But what if you need me?" Emma asked. "I'll survive one night without you, barely." "And what if Miss Mara gets scared and changes her mind?" "She's not going to change her mind, sweetheart. She loves us. Promise?" "Promise." Mara spent her last night as an unmarried woman drinking wine with her sister and mother on the cabin's deck, watching stars emerge against darkening sky. The conversation wandered through memories and hopes and gentle teasing about how quickly everything had happened. "Do you have any doubts?" her mother asked, the question carrying weight beyond simple curiosity. Mara considered it honestly. "No, not about Lucas, not about Emma, not about choosing this life. The only doubt I have is whether I deserve to be this happy after everything." "You deserve it," her sister said firmly. "You survived heartbreak and came out stronger. You get to have joy now. That's how it works." "Is it?" "It should be." Mara looked out at the mountains, dark shapes against darker sky, and thought about the journey that had brought her here. 6 months ago, she'd been drowning in the wreckage of her failed marriage. Now she was hours away from marrying a man who made her feel safe and valued and chosen every single day. It felt like magic, like something too good to be real. But it was real. She was living proof that people could heal, that love could be steady instead of volatile, that family could be built instead of just inherited. She slept poorly that night, too excited and nervous and aware of the significance of tomorrow. When dawn broke gray and pink over the mountains, she was already awake, watching light transform the landscape into something luminous. Her sister helped her get ready, managing hair and makeup and the endless tiny buttons down the back of her dress. Her mother brought breakfast, fruit and pastries and coffee, and told stories about her own wedding day, her voice warm with nostalgia. "I want you to have this," her mother said, pulling a handkerchief from her purse. "It was my mother's. She carried it at her wedding. I carried it at mine. Something old, something borrowed." Mara took the delicate lace square, feeling the weight of generations in the gesture. "Thank you, Mom. You look beautiful, happy. That's all I ever wanted for you." At noon, guests began arriving. 30 people who mattered, who'd watched their story unfold, who'd supported and encouraged and shown up when needed. Lucas's crew, dressed uncomfortably in suits and ties, but grinning with genuine happiness. Mara's yoga instructors, carrying the energy and warmth she'd tried to build into her studio's culture. Emma's teacher. The neighbor who'd watched Emma countless times. People who comprised the community they'd built together. Mara stood in the cabin's bedroom, peering through curtains at the gathering crowd, and felt her heart race with anticipation. This was really happening. In minutes, she'd walk out there and promise forever to a man she'd known for 6 months, but trusted completely. "You ready?" her sister asked, holding out the bouquet of wildflowers they'd picked that morning. "I'm ready." The ceremony itself was simple. Lucas's father officiated, reading words about commitment and partnership that felt personal rather than generic. Emma stood beside her father as junior bridesmaid, clutching her basket of flower petals, with the kind of seriousness only 7-year-olds could muster. When Mara walked out onto the deck and saw Lucas waiting for her, his face transforming with a smile that reached his eyes, she felt every last doubt dissolve. He looked perfect, not polished or performed, just perfectly himself in a simple gray suit, his hair still refusing to lie completely flat, his hands steady as she placed hers in them. Lucas's father asked who gave Mara to be married, and both her parents stood together. "We do," her father said, his voice thick with emotion. Then it was just her and Lucas and the promises they'd written themselves. "Mara," Lucas said, his voice carrying across the quiet gathering. "6 months ago, you opened your door and let me into your pain. You could have hidden it, could have said you were fine and sent me away. But you were brave enough to be broken in front of someone who was basically a stranger. That bravery changed everything. It let me see who you really were, not the person who'd been hurt, but the person who was strong enough to survive it and grow from it." He took a breath, his hands tightening slightly on hers. "I promise to honor that bravery by being worthy of your trust. I promise to choose you every single day, in the big moments and the small ones. I promise to be your partner, not your savior. To build our life together instead of trying to fix you or complete you, because you're already whole. I promise to love Emma with you, to show her what commitment looks like, to give her the stability we both missed in our first marriages. And I promise to make you coffee every morning for the rest of our lives, because that's where this started, and I never want to forget how simple kindness can change everything." Mara's eyes were streaming, but she smiled through the tears. "Lucas, you showed up when I needed someone most, and you stayed when you didn't have to. You made me believe that love could be steady instead of chaotic, that partnership was about showing up consistently instead of grand gestures. You gave me space to heal and courage to try again." She glanced at Emma, who was watching with rapt attention, then back at Lucas. "I promise to be patient with your daughter, our daughter, as she figures out what our family looks like. I promise to support your dreams the way you've supported mine. I promise to be honest about what I need instead of making you guess. I promise to remember that we chose each other freely, that nobody forced this or rushed it or made it happen except us. And I promise that when things get hard, because they will get hard, I won't run. I'll stay. I'll fight for us. I'll choose you again and again for as long as we both live." The rings they exchanged were worn smooth from previous lives, previous loves that had endured. Lucas's grandfather's ring fit perfectly on Mara's hand. His mother's wedding band slid onto Lucas's finger like it had been waiting for this moment. "By the power vested in me by the internet and the state of Virginia," Lucas's father said with a grin, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. Lucas, kiss your bride before she changes her mind." Lucas pulled Mara close and kissed her while their small gathering erupted in applause and cheers. Emma squealed with delight and threw flower petals in the air with wild abandon. Someone popped champagne. Music started playing from speakers they'd hidden among the trees. And just like that, Mara became a wife again. But this time she was choosing it from strength instead of need, from hope instead of fear, from certainty instead of pressure. The reception was barbecue and coleslaw and potato salad served on paper plates with pie instead of wedding cake because Emma had insisted pie was superior. They danced on the deck to music that ranged from classic country to pop songs Emma loved. Lucas's crew took turns spinning Mara around until she was dizzy and laughing. Her sister caught the bouquet and immediately handed it to her youngest daughter, who promptly tried to eat it. As the sun set and the party continued with tiki torches lighting the gathering dusk, Lucas pulled Mara away from the crowd to the lakeshore where they'd sat months ago throwing stones into the water. "How are you feeling, Mrs. Reed?" he asked. Mara tested the name, finding it fit better than Collins ever had. "Happy, overwhelmed, grateful. Is that allowed? To be this happy?" "It's required, actually. I checked the marriage license." She laughed and leaned into him. "Thank you." "For what?" "For seeing me when I was invisible, for staying when I was broken, for making me believe I deserved this." Lucas kissed her temple. "You've always deserved this. You just needed someone to show up and prove it." They stood together watching the last light fade from the sky, and Mara thought about transformation, about caterpillars who had to completely dissolve before they could become butterflies, about how sometimes you had to break down entirely to rebuild into something stronger. She'd been that caterpillar, dissolved, formless, trusting that somehow the chaos would reorganize into something beautiful. And it had. She'd emerged from the chrysalis of her failed marriage with wings she'd grown herself, strong enough to fly, but choosing to stay grounded with the people who mattered. Later, much later, after the last guests had departed and Emma had fallen asleep in the cabin's loft, still wearing her purple dress, Lucas and Mara stood on the deck alone. The night was cool and clear, stars scattered across the sky like promises. "What are you thinking about?" Lucas asked. "About how I came here ready to grieve the end of everything, and instead I found the beginning. No regrets? Not a single one." Mara turned to face him. "I know people will say we move too fast, that 6 months isn't enough time to really know someone. But Lucas, I know you. I know how you make coffee in the morning, and how you braid Emma's hair, and how you show love through actions instead of just words. I know you're steady when I'm spinning, and patient when I'm scared, and certain when I doubt. That's everything I need to know." Lucas cupped her face in his hands. "For the record, I know you too. I know you're stronger than you think you are. I know you lead with kindness but have steel underneath. I know you're building something beautiful with your studio because you refuse to let fear win. I know you love my daughter like she's yours. And I know you're going to be an incredible partner for the next 60 years minimum." 60? I thought we agreed on 53. That was before you married me. Now you're stuck for at least 60. 60 it is then. They kissed under the stars, husband and wife, partners in the truest sense. When they finally went inside, they found Emma had woken up and was sitting in the window seat watching them. "You guys are so mushy," she said, but she was smiling. "Get used to it, kid," Lucas said, scooping her up. "You're stuck with both of us now." "Good. I like being stuck with you." They put Emma back to bed together, both of them tucking her in, both of them kissing her forehead. As they stood in the doorway, watching her drift back to sleep, Mara felt Lucas take her hand. "We did it," he whispered. "We did. Now comes the easy part. Just loving each other for the rest of our lives." "You think that's the easy part? Compared to everything we survived to get here? Absolutely." The next morning, they woke tangled together in the cabin's master bedroom, sunlight streaming through windows they'd forgotten to curtain. Emma crawled into bed with them around 7, wedging herself between them and declaring that family pancakes were mandatory on the first official day of being a complete family. They made breakfast together, Mara mixing batter while Lucas manned the griddle, and Emma provided running commentary on the perfect pancake shape. They ate on the deck with syrup and fresh berries, and nobody mentioned that they needed to pack up soon, return to regular life, face the reality of work and schedules and ordinary existence. "Can we come back here?" Emma asked. "All the time?" "As often as we want," Lucas promised. "Grandpa never uses it anymore. He said it's ours now if we want it." "For real? We can have a cabin?" "For real." Emma pumped her fist in victory. "This is the best family ever." Mara met Lucas's eyes across the table and saw her own joy reflected there. They'd built this. Not perfectly, not without pain, but deliberately and with commitment. They'd taken broken pieces and created something whole. When they finally drove back down the mountain that afternoon, Mara turned in her seat to watch the cabin disappear behind them. It had witnessed her transformation, from broken to healing to whole, from afraid to hopeful to certain, from alone to family. "What are you thinking?" Lucas asked, one hand on the wheel and one reaching for hers. "That I spent 12 years in a marriage trying to become someone Derek wanted, and I spent 6 months with you learning to become myself." "And who did you become?" Mara smiled. "Someone brave enough to try again, someone who knows her worth, someone who understands that love is supposed to feel safe, not scary. I like who you became." "Me too." They drove in comfortable silence for a while, Emma chattering from the back seat about the butterflies they'd released and how they were probably flying over mountains right now, free and beautiful and exactly what they were meant to be. When they pulled into their driveway, their home, singular and shared, Mara noticed something new. A small wooden sign hung by the front door that hadn't been there when they left. It read, "The Reed Family," with a carved butterfly beneath the words. "Lucas, my dad made it. Dropped it off yesterday while we were at the cabin. Said every family needs a name on their door." Mara stared at the sign, at her new name declared proudly for the world to see. The Reed Family. Not Mara Collins trying to fit into someone else's life. Not Mara trying to be enough for someone who'd already decided she wasn't. Just Mara Reed, choosing and chosen, building something real. Emma ran ahead to unlock the door, and Mara hung back for just a moment, looking at the house that had become home. 6 months ago, she'd stood in her own doorway, broken and lost. Lucas had shown up to return a mailbox key and stayed to rebuild her world. Now here they were, married, committed, family. The mailbox key still sat in the bowl by the door, a reminder of how small moments could change everything, how showing up mattered, how kindness compounded into love. "You coming, Mrs. Reed?" Lucas called from the doorway. Mara smiled at the name, at the man who'd given it to her, at the life they were building together. "Yeah, I'm coming." She walked through the door into her home, into her marriage, into the rest of her life. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, Mara wasn't afraid of what came next. She was ready for it. Ready for the yoga studio opening in 2 weeks. Ready for Emma's third-grade year starting in the fall. Ready for the ordinary days and the extraordinary ones, the challenges and the triumphs, the quiet mornings and the chaotic evenings. Ready for love that was steady and sure and chosen every single day. That night, after Emma was asleep and they were alone in their bedroom, Lucas pulled Mara close and asked one more time, "Happy?" And Mara, who'd learned that happiness wasn't something you found in another person, but something you built with them, smiled against his chest and answered with absolute certainty. So happy. They'd started with a mailbox key and built a kingdom. They'd taken broken pieces and created beauty. They'd chosen each other in the wreckage and promised forever in the mountains. And now they had the rest of their lives to prove that love, the right love, the steady love, the show-up-everyday love, could heal anything. The butterflies had emerged from their chrysalises and learned to fly. The caterpillar who was afraid to change had discovered that transformation led to something better. And Mara, who thought her story ended the day Derek left, had learned that sometimes the best chapters are the ones you write after everything falls apart. She fell asleep in Lucas's arms, his mother's ring warm on her finger, Emma's soft breathing audible from down the hall, and her heart, once shattered, now mended, beating steady and strong and full of hope for everything that lay ahead.